Beautiful. Email this afternoon. By the way, we have no Zoom or sound system.
Thank God. Thank
Doesn't
God.
look good.
Okay, you're gonna have to tell me.
Well, it's not from the email. It sounded like the equipment wasn't even in the building. Like, okay, that might be more
No,
than we
it was
can work
here.
with.
Yeah, it was
It was here, it just wasn't turned on.
correct.
So that's great.
We go down over here and
What we may have to do is
you know, you get
financial
the
aid to pull in.
That's what Ron said to do. He said pull a side table. I
Or
said, well, I got
what we should do is we should requisite and purchase
a table.
one of the little folding tables that are like half that size. That might be, because we're gonna have 2 more planning commissioners
if
that we
you
have
want,
sitting here
yeah,
now.
Right.
what we prefer to do.
That was never a problem when we weren't social distancing, but social distancing was never a problem
But
for all
then you
COVID because
didn't
we never
limit
had
that
a
guy who
seat.
owns that, if somebody.
So you
Right,
can,
we
you
can't
can,
have
you
people
know,
since COVID started.
you can put 2 people at one table, you just
That's
gotta
the
put 2
thing,
mics.
there isn't such a thing.
Not really, the mics will pick them up. You just put it in between the two.
Okay.
I don't think you would need to, but.
Are you hearing this, Mr. Harshfield?
Space these days.
Yes, they can hear us.
That's where my objection on camper. See, an RV park, it's like any.
See,
Yeah,
Lois
you
has a
have to
funky,
find a different, be specific.
these are
Design
straight,
specific.
these are curved.
Those campgrounds, say RV park.
And
Well,
well,
you
we have to,
can,
we
like,
just
I
like
can put
Lois
an
is like,
RV in your campground zone.
No, I was trying to think,
So it's-
maybe,
we have to bump it up.
Yeah.
It doesn't say.
Lois, you need that much room on the table, right?
Oh, I need this much room.
Right, you could actually use a little more, correct?
Probably, but I'm fine.
No, but that's where you have to be, because that's where all that crap is,
Yeah, those
right?
there, they're
Because
for
of
sale. I mean, you buy it a lot and,
I think a campground too.
but they have a rental program. You know, a lease program. I think it was running about $3,000 a month, I think, in the summer.
Yes, that is like a campground, every 2 weeks, and a lot of the parks, and you have turnover, more people coming.
You gotta remember, there's not a lot of place to turn over to. If you say, well, someone wants to come up for summer, stay 2 weeks, they've done on the 15th, but not this shop.
Then you
No,
go
you
somewhere,
won't.
then you go to an RV park, you don't go to the camp.
No, you won't find a spot.
Yeah,
because-
you will, if you want to. You will. I'm talking about. I'm looking at campers. I should go take a 2-week vacation, go up with their camper, another guy goes up, guys come up fishing in the fall for a week or 2, they don't come for all winter. Their houses are.
There's a lot of people who come up for this, or as though they have the house.
I usually grab them.
Come up there and get out.
Oh, thank you.
But they go to an RV.
Go get
He's
that
just
one.
quick, we're going
That's the house. Then for 2 weeks at a time. I won't go for 8.
Carl, you're recording right now, dude.
Doesn't matter. Everybody else will see.
We're all here.
It's cool.
Our policies and rules. Oh, okay, that's good.
Oh, good for you.
Good to go, Lois.
We have an extra agenda. Oh, look, another extra agenda. There's
Some on the
another
table?
extra one sitting at my
There's some on the
house.
table.
Yeah, there's plenty on the table.
Where's mine?
We can call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Just a moment.
Otherwise, we were doubling down. You guys are welcome to shut that off if you'd like. But it is loud. Thank you very much. Are these posted on the website yet?
Some kind of computer
The meetings?
website type stuff that's all wrong. It's,
Okay. Because I think Alex will want a copy and I don't know if Mike will want a copy. It involves a computer, so it's questionable. Are we good?
well, I can do roll call before I
Roll call.
hit that on there. Mangus,
Yes.
Jacobson, no. Keaton,
Yes.
Robo,
Yeah.
Darrow, no. Steelman,
Here.
Vamos,
Here. And both absences were excused.
okay.
They did call and let us know in advance that they had a conflict. And hey, now that we're not down to 4 people, it's almost kind of novel to say no problem.
It is odd to think that we could be crowded.
So nice.
We could be crowded.
Well, I was like, how hasn't this been a problem? We haven't had more than 5 people for pretty much all of COVID. So, yeah. Using a desk didn't matter.
Yeah.
So, all right, set adjust meeting agenda. Anything else? Anything that needs to be added? All right, we'll move on. Conflict of interest. Okay, full disclosure, I don't think there's anybody that isn't aware. I own property that's currently has a condo zone platting on it right now. But just like we all own homes, we still do home rules. I do not see that as a conflict of. All right, anybody else? All right, public comment. We will start with individuals in town hall. Please come to the podium to speak. Be respectful of time. And only one comment on each.
Highmore Banks Road. Thank you to the PC, all of you for working diligently on the zoning ordinances so that we can move closer to getting the moratorium lifted. Welcome to the new planner, Randy Melnick, to this table. I believe his knowledge and expertise can help the PC with their goals. It's also great to see a board member at the table, Trustee Valmuth. I look forward to you being the communication link between the PC and the board. It's never been more needed. I truly believe that working together is key to getting the master plan and the zoning ordinances in order. Kim Mangus, Alex Darrow, Al Keaton, Carl Robel, Rachel Steelman, Mike Jacobson, Heidi Valmuth, and Randy Melnick. The FIT team. FIT is my acronym for Fix It Together. I think that we can do lots of things when we work together as a team. As we read through the 34 pages of today's PC agenda, we were happy to see Article 28 being worked on, giving clarification and definitions to the many types of condominiums and the process for application and approval. However, we hope that terms are correctly implemented and consistent. We see on page 22, the paragraph on PUDs still exists. We feel that this is confusing. We're not sure the thought process of having planned unit developments in the condominium development regulations article. There's probably an explanation. Also, we've recently heard of a golf course interest in Whitewater Township. Do we have any procedures or processes for direction for golf courses in our community. I couldn't locate any, but it's just a thought. So thanks for your service to the community, all of you, and have a great meeting. Thanks.
Any other public comments in town hall? All yours.
There was an article mentioned in the packet, where we will live. I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not, but basically there's one paragraph. It says north of the 45th North Parallel, which runs through Michigan, for instance, will be the 21st century's booming haven. It represents 15% of the planet's area, but holds 29% of its ice-free land and is currently home to a small fraction of the world's aging people. It is entering the optimum climate for human productivity with mean average temperatures of around 13 degrees Celsius. And I'm just going to read another part of it, that Duluth in Minnesota on Lake Superior bills itself as the most climate-proof city in the US, although it's already dealing with fluctuating water levels. The university, more southerly Midwestern cities face the threat of extreme heat waves. The University of Notre Dame's Global Adaptation Initiative research has concluded that 8 of the top 10 cities facing the highest likelihood of extreme heat in 2040 are located in the Midwest, including cities from Detroit to Grand Rapids. So that was the point that I wanted in that article. The other one is in our master plan, if there will be a PDR, purchase of developmental rights program. MDR does have an agriculture and rural development preservation fund grant. They awarded 1.8 million last year. The only township in Grand Traverse County, I believe, is the Peninsula Township, Old Mission Peninsula. And I have a copy of the grant program and policies, procedures, and all that. I'll be happy just to leave it with the commission and let them maybe have a copy to look at. But it's something worth considering, I hope, and include into the master plan. Thank you. And I'll just, you can keep that if you want.
And I'm going to, anyone who wants to check this out first, see me. Other than that, we'll give it to Bob and anyone can pick it up from him. Does that work?
Okay.
We can just take turns. All right, any other public comment? You're right. Okay, do we have any public comment from Zoom?
Can you tell me how many people are on Zoom, please?
4 are on Zoom and Vicki Beam has her hand up.
Okay, Vicki, the floor is yours.
Good evening, all of you. I want to echo what both of the previous comments made. It is great to see a full table. And as always, I thank you all for your time. I know that time is precious for all of us and you're taking time away from family to be here. So I thank you for that. And welcome, Randy. What a great addition. And Heidi, again, echoing what Connie said. I'm so happy to have board representation. I know that the PC has been begging for this. As many of you know, those of us on Baggs Road have been attending meetings since the announcement that a site condo was planned. We have done our research. I really am hoping that all of you were taking notes on, and especially from Connie, but a lot of the time that was spent on digging into the ordinances and the gaping holes. And one of the things that I think is most glaring to me and definitely still needs to be dealt with is that the split for the property that the proposed site condos are supposed to be on was split illegally. We have reached out for documentation on the split, and we've been told that Bob Hall had the authority to do this split. The interesting thing is that this split, and if you go back and look at the paperwork that came out to all of you in March, the split was one of the first. Those of us that bought property adjacent to it were done later. So there really was no reason for that not to be conforming with the 1-to-4 ratio. So I think that's one thing to point out. And now Bob Hull is bringing up wetlands as a reason, which was really never discussed before. Although many of us that now live here have told you there are definitely water problems here, especially in the spring. I just got back from Nashville. Granted, Nashville is a big city, but guess what all the residents that I spoke with were complaining about there? The development and expansion of that area is happening faster than the infrastructure and planning can keep up with. I told you this when I went to Charleston back in June, you know, one of the historical cities, and their biggest concern is what it is doing to the history of the world. I totally echo the comments that were made about people moving here. The conference that I was at, unfortunately, a lot of the people there were from Florida, and a lot of them are now homeless and carless, and they've decided they are not going to rebuild in Florida. Guess where they're looking? We don't have hurricanes. We don't have nasty bugs, nasty snakes, a lot of the other things that they're dealing with. The pressure is going to continue to come to us. And unfortunately, I don't think that our township is prepared. We're having pressure here to build and expand. I've been called a developer by Clerk Goss, which is a complete lie. We bought property because we thought we were going to be in a rural and agricultural area where we would not have to worry about light pollution, traffic problems, noise pollution, crime, other things that might go along with it. Now the lack and foresight and planning in this township threatens the very rural character that Whitewater Township is all about. Please, as I've implored from you all many times, take this time to figure out what the area, residents, and infrastructure really can sustain and want. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do you have any other public comment on Zoom? Please raise your hand or use the raise hand icon. Anybody else? Okay, we will move on. Okay, we have no public hearing this evening. We do have the approval of the minutes from our September 7th meeting. Did anybody find issue with any of the information?
I'm not gonna vote.
That's fine. You weren't here.
I know. Well, I was here, I was on Zoom, but
Well, yeah, but that's fine.
no comment from me.
No, that's fine. Anybody see anything that was off? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve as presented.
I'd make the motion to approve the minutes.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call when ready, Lois.
Yes.
Darrow is absent, Jacobson absent, Keaton,
Yes.
Mangus,
Yes.
Steelman,
Yes.
Bowman. Oh,
I can
you're
abstain.
just gonna abstain.
All right. You will notice that there's some public comment, communication correspondence here. Al provided, this is general research, but it seemed like the best place to put it. Al provided some research that he had done on a new campground that had just gone in. You will find the map and the information with it. And you will also find the links to the information that Denise was giving us earlier. Bob will have a copy, but you can all pull it up on your computer if you want to read it there. Okay. Do we have Bob Hall online currently?
We do not.
Okay. I should probably add this in as a change to the agenda. It's kind of sort of a change. Bob was going to be running between an emergency meeting that he had to catch and another meeting that he had to catch, and was going to try to slip into ours somewhere in between. So when and if he pops in, is it okay with the commission that we go ahead and let him give whatever report he has to do?
Yeah,
I told him we
absolutely.
would work him in
Yeah.
when he was able to pop and swing through. That this was a good night for that because there's, you know, not as much critical that we need his interactive input on. And Randy now. So that brings me to the chair's report. Happy birthday, Rachel.
Thank you.
Oh.
She's spending her birthday with us.
Oh.
That's dedication. To state the painfully obvious, we have a board rep for the first time in 2.5 years. Which is way too long. So now I can get away with not attending board meetings.
Oh, come on.
That's not my objective.
Oh, come on.
But it's a nice thought.
Oh, come on.
And we have Randy. And I would have let everybody know that Randy would be joining us. Not quite out in the audience, but I don't think he even had his contract when I put the packet out.
Right.
It's a very recent thing.
Maybe I can get in at the end of the reports here and give a little overview.
Can do. We'll let you take Bob's spot and we'll just give him another one if he shows up. Yes, that is it. Why don't we put that in? We'll back up to change of agenda and let's add E, planner's report.
Okay, there you go.
Does that work for everybody? Are
Mhm.
there any objections? Okay. Now that we have a planner, we haven't had to do that. All right, and Heidi, you have a spot.
Hi, guys. I'm on the same team you all are on, and I'll prove it. I have a handout, hang on. Okay, what I just handed you was my resume, what you have to know about me if you need to know more. My business card's on there also. Call me, my phone's always open. You can also email me, that's on there too.
Pull it a
Louder.
little closer.
I use outside voice. Okay, so I'm giving you an index card for one reason. I need to know how to communicate with you. So if you want me to communicate with you, I need to know what email you want me to use, what phone number you want me to use, if you want to be called, if you don't want to be called, and maybe a little bit about you too. But I'm sitting here and I know nothing about all of you. So other than I've been a person out there for about 7 years. So I've been in the audience for about 7 years. I haven't missed too many meetings. I have done a lot of homework for this evening. I hope everybody else did. And that's how I roll. I got nothing else.
Okay. And Carl, did we have any ZBA?
I think Bob reported the two items. Last month, we had two appeals. One for Larson Road, which is a 2-track back into the woods. There was a shed that was blown down in a windstorm, and these were built way before we had any zoning ordinances, and he was putting it on the same pad, but he wanted to extend it by 4 feet, and some objections to it. Secondly was there's a compound that's been back the southwest side of Elk Lake for years and years. It's on a private road called Okayoka
Okiokia.
Road. And I know I read some history on it a few years ago. These families went in there and established their own little place. I don't know what you call it in the compound. Their own little rules on what you could do and couldn't do, how late you could stay up. And one of the places in there was originally called a shed. Someone objected to it, I guess. But if it had been converted into I'd call a bunkhouse, had 1 bedroom, a toilet, and a little storage shed on the end of it. And it was right near the edge of the property, close to the stream, and it was very wet. and they wanted to tear that down and build a newer, a little larger cottage in further out of that area. And I went in there, looked at it and talked to people, and that was approved. There were no objections, and it was approved. In fact, they thought they might even be able, I think it was still 2 feet over the easement. And I think they thought they could probably move it completely into it. They were gonna look into it, so we approved it.
And if I remember correctly, Bob said in both occurrences, if they weren't changing anything, he could have just approved it himself. It was because they were
Right.
making adjustments
Yeah.
that it went to the ZBA. Carl,
What?
am I off on that?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. Okay.
I don't know if the point.
The
was
minutes
that-
are available for the ZBA if anybody needs
Yeah,
them.
if he said that, then that's, he did need our approval.
Yeah.
That's part of our regulation is
Mhm.
that
They were
we can
non-conforming.
take other factors into account. It's not hard and fast, yes, no.
Right.
And in this case, there was everything on our checklist said, yes,
Okay, there was some wiggle room that you went with.
yes.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, and Randy, welcome. It is
Okay.
nice to. have
Well, it's
come
nice
full
to be here finally after a fair amount of time here. My wife and I started attending meetings. What was it, probably 6 months ago or so, and saw some of the issues that were at play in the township. And I've had a number of conversations with the planning commission and town board and so forth. And was asked to provide a proposal to the township. Is this on?
That's better.
That better? So anyway, we did provide a proposal at the end of August that was accepted, and we just signed the contract late last week. So there wasn't really any time to get anything in your packet with regard to the services that we'll provide. But I did want to kind of go over what just some general thoughts. I don't take up too much time. I know we've got an agenda here, and I hope to participate in the conversations as we go forward. But the contract essentially includes working on both the master plan as well as some ordinance work. When it started the conversation, we realized that the master plan is out of date, it needs work, and we need to fix it and get a new one adopted. And so that process, as many of you know, often takes about a year or so in communities. So that needs to go forward. But then also, as you all know, there's a lot of ordinance work that is necessary as you deal with the moratorium and the various sections, some of which we'll talk about tonight. And I'm prepared to help with that as well. I did ask the township for a system wherein we do a purchase order or something so that it's clear exactly what I'm to do, when it's to be done, and how much it would cost. So I want to try to keep that some structure here so there's no misunderstanding between the township board and the planning commission about what we're doing besides the master plan. I did also make a commitment to provide material to the chair or whoever is putting the packet together to get material to you before the meeting in a PDF form so you can review it before we meet. So you can have an opportunity to see elements of the master plan as well as any ordinance work that we're working on ahead of time. And I would hope that you'd spend some time doing that so that we can have these meetings be as productive as possible. There's, I believe, a lot of work that needs to happen in a fairly short period of time. And so we're going to have to try to hit the ground running. I also, maybe in the next packet, we can include the proposed approach and organizational issues to the master plan. And I'll give you a little more detail about the general process that you go through with a master plan. There's really a discovery phase, and then there's a community engagement phase, and then there's a phase to actually develop the plan. And I've kind of described that in a little bit more detail in the proposal. So with that, I don't want to take up too much time. I know we have a number of issues that I hope to weigh in. I didn't really have anything to present other than some general comments on your agenda items as we go through this.
If we had known a few days earlier,
Yeah.
We would have had master planning
Right.
as a line item, and we will next month, I'm sure. So we have actually been holding off on that because it just did not make sense for us to pick up with our process of soliciting input without a planner on board when we were so close. So we'll get there and get the review completed hopefully very soon. All right, unfinished business. The first item, update on the zoning ordinance amendments that have been submitted to the board. First, number 83, which pertains to Article 1 preamble, Article 12 setbacks, I'm summarizing, and Article 14 waterfront. The board has had a brief discussion at 2 meetings and has not made it through it. So they've had it since August or since July even for that one. So they've had it for several months. They haven't made it through that. And it's easy to see, you know, we spend 9 months on it and they get 20 minutes to look at what we've been hashing out and discussing and researching for an extended period of time. So they have not completed those. Article 25 site plan and special use permit procedures was reviewed at a special meeting they had this month, and it has gone through. It has been voted into place. It should be posted online soon, and it should be in our books. Next month, we should all have an updated copy for our copies of the zoning ordinance for anybody that has hard copies. And then Article 80, which is adult use marijuana, the board has in front of them, but they have not picked that up yet. That was what we sent them last month with a recommendation to not adopt based on the fact that they've removed the authorization for marijuana in the township. All right. Any questions on any of those? Okay. Next, we have the special meeting that we had with the board. The board was having a meeting with the attorney that pertained to the planning commission as well, and was going to spend some time. They scheduled an extra meeting to meet with the attorney, but also to look at the ordinance amendments that we had sent them. That was the meeting where they passed Article 25's amendment. And as opposed to perhaps doing a joint meeting, Ron asked me to have another planning commissioner join for that meeting for input and discussion purposes. Al was free and was able to attend that meeting with me. We were both on Zoom, as was the attorney, so that worked. And we couldn't have another person because Heidi had been made our 7th member, so that made 3, and that's the limit for adding without making it a joint meeting or something like that. And it seemed appropriate for the topic to just have a little bit of input without hauling everybody out for an extra. When you get that many people at the table, it sometimes gets harder to get things done. So Al and I attended as guests and were allowed to speak when spoken to. Kind of a situation, kind of a structure. The topics for that meeting, do you want to give your 2 cents worth, Al, and just let everybody know what was on the agenda? And
Well, we talked about the insurance, you know, for members, are we covered, you know, for a lawsuit. And we talked about if our insurance would cover lawsuits personally, if we was ever sued. And the attorney really didn't have I didn't hear any answer from him. And then there was some should or could, but that wasn't an answer. So at this point, we still don't have an answer.
the board did indicate that if the insurance for some reason did not cover a planning commissioner, and Heidi, please correct me if I'm misspeaking.
I'm
on any of
listening,
this.
I'm listening.
If the insurance did not cover someone because we had hit our limit, which these days can happen, or if just wasn't deemed by the insurance company a covered item, assuming that there was no wrongdoing. We weren't intentionally trying to hurt somebody or doing something illegal, that the township would pick that up, even if the insurance company did not. Am I correct?
Correct.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And this is something that for all of the planning commissioners to be aware of. This is something that did come up with some statements of some individuals indicating that they had interest in directly suing planning commissioners as opposed to the township in general. So that's what brought up the conversation. And I agree with you. We didn't get a hard and fast answer.
No.
We got a kind of probably, likely.
And still, we're still on a should.
And Al was kind enough to ask the board when they said, yes, we'll definitely cover no matter what, as long as you weren't doing something illegal. We have asked them to add that to their policy and procedures manual and provide us with a copy in writing, please. There was also some discussion that it's already in the policy and procedures manual, but because we haven't been given a copy of that,
Yeah, we don't know.
we don't know that.
No.
We haven't seen it. So that was on our list of hard copies of the ordinance, policy and procedure manual, and employee handbook are the 3 items that we had requested from the board that we have not yet received. So
Did you receive your books?
yes, we got the books. We got our books, but we didn't get the
I
rest.
don't have mine.
You don't have your book. Okay.
Randy don't have one.
Is there anybody else that does?
I had one.
Is there anybody other than Rachel that doesn't have this? And Randy, do you need one?
No.
Okay,
You have one?
I have similar material. but-
Okay. All right.
I figured. So we need one copy of the book, which I
No, you
did.
need 2. You need one too.
I have a supplemental that it fills in what's between my old book and this book.
Okay.
Hey, that's what they ordered. It should just be a matter of getting it from the clerk, because when I put in the request for everybody, I put in the request for the extra copies for the seats we didn't have filled yet. So hopefully she already has it. We'll just have to get. Who still needs a hard copy and or ones? You don't have to have them. Who does not have and would like a hard copy of the current zoning ordinance?
I would.
You have, okay, that's everybody.
I'm not sure that I have one.
Probably not.
I mean,
It will still say draft across it.
Yeah.
Ignore the word draft. That is our zoning ordinance. We just can't pull the word off.
so it's not in Word, it's a PDF.
That's one of the things we've been working on is
Okay, I thought you mentioned that you had a copy of
The-
the Word.
I have an old copy. I think she has my old copy. Ron has an old copy. None of us have a copy that we know matches what's being used. So what we did a couple months ago, I think while you were on vacation, was all the planning commissioners took 5 or 6 articles and we did a word by word comparison between what a few of us have in our own personal home computers or our township computer at home, not the certified copy, and the one that's online. So we did a comparison, and there's a lot of variance between the two. Some more, some less. And then since I've been chair, 13 articles have been amended. And Cheryl had a copy of those. I had FOIA'd a copy of those articles, and I did get a copy from the clerk, but she did not certify that they were the right copies. So they kind of still need a little bit of, and one article, she gave me three different versions. And I have not sat down to review those particular word copies as well. Because the board does, the statement was, well, you already have those. Well, yeah, I have drafts of most of them, but I don't know what ones were passed by the board and what additional subtle changes they may have made to typos, wording, what lines they might have removed when they approved it. So we do have copies. We don't necessarily have, the clerk does not have a copy of the ordinance that she's willing to certify and say, here's the ordinance. Does that answer your question probably more than. you
Well,
wanted.
no, it does, but I guess, I mean, that's really a fundamental issue here
Yeah,
for
I
the
know.
township that we don't have that, so.
It came up at that meeting. Well, why didn't you just present us with a whole new copy of the entire article? Because I'm not going to type 25 pages of technical
Right, I remember that.
language.
Yes. Okay.
And that's why. I do have a copy, but it should be a certified copy. So we're still working through that. And I believe, I've been told by the supervisors that that's something, how to get that issue resolved for the PC, for the zoning ordinance, for the general ordinances across the spectrum for the township is going to be upcoming in the board meeting.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Is that something, you know, Randy knows what he's doing. Is that a project that we could give to him and say, before we move too much further, let's straighten the ordinance out so that we know when we say this, there's not something underneath it that disputes that, what we just said, and that we don't know.
What we were looking at doing was taking the articles that we have reviewed
Mhm.
and getting to the point where we have an entire word copy of the entire ordinance.
Okay.
Now, the ones that matched, where we, like Article 1, we don't need to do Article 1, we just amended it and sent it to the board.
Mhm.
So there's nothing else to do on Article 1. Article 2, okay, were there any changes between the old file version and the one that's online? If there's no changes, we don't need to readopt that either.
Mhm.
But in the ones that did have variance between our old copy and what we're currently using,
Mhm.
those are the ones we need to maybe not go through and fix everything that's wrong, but we may need to go through, get a word copy and adopt it, even if we're going to come back in a couple months and amend it, so that we have 37 articles in Word, all of which are what are currently being used by the township. And then it will make it much easier to go through and do amendments if I don't have to retype them.
So let me ask another follow-up question though, if.
Yes.
So are we certain that what is labeled draft on the website is final? It's just that we don't have a word
No.
copy of that? Okay. So
We are as close as it's going to get. That is what's been in use for a number of years. But there are amendments that have questionable history. So some of those are the ones that we would certainly
So who
want to
knows that
readopt
they're-
or review.
Who knows that they're questionable history? Is that just
Well,
anecdotal information?
If
or
I
is
go
that-
back and look at them and I still have questions, it's a questionable history.
Well-
Some of them, there have been a few amendments that have been made over the years. Didn't know what you were getting into, did you?
No,
That
we need to get to the heart of this.
weren't published or there was a notice of a public hearing published, but there were things that were changed that were not in the notice. There are some issues like that.
I had a
Yes.
question. Can we effectively move forward until we get that straightened out? Say, this is it, rip up all your others, this is it.
I think we can still move forward because
Okay.
what we're doing is we're moving forward with fixing it. So whether that's going back,
Hang
one
on,
of the
I'd like
things,
to hear Randy's opinion.
But,
well-
but what are we fixing? I guess
Yeah,
it-
we can't find it,
just
see
a
it.
minute. One of the things that we have done for quite a while, and I understand this predates everyone but me on the planning commission, Lois, as the recording secretary. When I became chair, we shifted over to, with really the exception of Article 25. Every time we've made an amendment, we have reviewed the entire article and readopted the entire article. So that's one of the ways that we've been going through and correcting so that if there were any errors,
Okay.
we are readopting all of it. And then it becomes, so the 13 of the 37 articles that we have done since I've been the chair, were readopted in their entirety. So those are solid in their background. Some of the other ones less so. They're missing
Do we-
missing sections in some other ones.
Do we have something that says that this is it, forget the others, in the sense that these are the ones, so somebody wouldn't find another copy and think that this is a
Oh,
correct
someone
one?
might find another copy. There are a lot of different copies out there. What,
How
the
can we
way that
fix
that
it?
is typically done is the desk copy
Mhm.
that is kept on the desk here in the ZA's office and in the clerk's office. The clerk is the official record keeper of the township. Her certified copy is the copy.
Okay,
She just won't certify it. So
so we don't have a
Wait, wait,
copy.
wait,
That kinda
wait,
leaves
wait,
us in
wait,
limbo.
wait, wait. She won't certify it or it's never been certified?
each
Either
each
or.
clerk, as they add things to it, has to file paperwork saying that they certified that this was passed. So that is at the very top for me. That's getting that in Word, especially,
Mhm.
and resolving any issues in the history of adoption has been one of the foremost things that we've been doing. So when people say, well, there's all kinds of problems in the ordinance. Yeah, I know. We're trying to hit them one at a time to at least get the ordinance as functional as possible and address any issues that we find and eliminate any history of questionable background. And I'm gonna let you weigh in, after Rachel, I'll let you weigh in. Go ahead.
Is
Rachel.
there an outline or something that indicates what date each article has been amended or updated or certified or any type of overview?
Kind of,
about
sort
it?
of, but it's not exhaustive and it's not easy to read.
So I'm really.
So yes,
with
there is a
Al
history,
that
but it's
we
not
need to
reviewed.
have a, I mean, I just don't know how we can.
There is a history of all amendments, and that is another document that we could ask for a copy of from the township.
What's it
I have a
called?
copy.
Yeah,
What's
what's
it
the
called?
official
History of
name?
amendments. So zoning ordinance, history of amendments. And always, the clerk is, as the official record keeper, has the original documents. The cutout of the page, of the notice from the newspaper, taped in a book in her office. If you ask her for a certified copy of the ordinance, what she gave the recodification company when our ordinance was sent to, I believe it's Muni Code for recodification, she sent them the original ordinance and all of the amendments ever made with their notices. It was 600 pages. What came back from Muni Code, in my personal opinion, having actually read the document, bears only a vague similarity to our ordinance. It's not, they did not, after 50 years, they did not come out with the same document.
But they can only work with what they've been given.
Exactly.
So they can't manufacture stuff. They're only
Yep.
reorganizing and, codifying what they've been
They
given.
hadn't done any of that. They were asked to take all of our history and reproduce the zoning ordinance. Not surprisingly, you all also have to realize 50 years ago, the record keeping requirements weren't even the same. But what they came out with on this end was not the same as the document that we have. It's just not. There was supposed to be a process. There was a discussion with the attorney, Muni Code, the board, and myself that the board was going to go through and compare Muni Code's version with what we had online, and the planning commission was going to readopt it. But somewhere along the process, not here, it got dropped.
I guess my question
So-
is, do we all agree that we can move forward with what we have? Or should, if we have, I wonder, is it somebody going to read one thing and think that's the way it is when actually it isn't, because there's a history, but it's not there. So they don't know it's been amended.
I think
Are
what
we
it
in a
is
position where we could get that?
what we're moving forward with is fixing it.
Okay, I want to hear from you.
Yes.
So I think the major problem here is the fact that, the ordinance is not a bunch of individual chapters. It's individual chapters, but they all relate to each other and they all share common definitions and there's cross references. When you say site plan in one section, it means the same thing as site plan in another section. So as we go through these things and look at them individually, we're kind of losing that cohesiveness of the zoning ordinance, the way it's supposed to function. So I do have concerns about the fact that if we go through section by section, and we have to, I realize that we've got to deal with these problems, but at the same time, we've got to get some real work going to get this zoning ordinance into a cohesive shape. I shared with a couple people a copy of a zoning ordinance from a couple communities, actually. I think Heidi wants to talk about it at the end of the meeting, about showing how they're put together now with hyperlinks, and you click on a section, it says see section whatever, it takes you there. It's color coded, there's graphics, it's strong. You can, there's all the ambiguities are reduced to almost nothing. you can get it in a much more clear fashion. And that's probably one of the biggest problems you have with zoning ordinances all over, is that they're so complicated and they relate one section to another. If you're just looking at one section, it's hard to really fully appreciate the requirements that are being put out there. So that's my concern as we go
One of
through
the
this.
things we did, and you're absolutely 100% correct. One of the things that we did was we started with more standalone articles that weren't independent as we were working on getting used to the process of making the amendments. And then when we went through residential districts, we started with residential or with commercial and then industrial. And then we worked our way through as the more and more restrictive districts as you go through the ordinance. We have not gone through and completed the ag district, and we have not done the RC district. Those are the two districts we did not review or complete. That's when we had some issues and our process was not working as well. That's when everything went to Muni Code, and we figured we'd wait and see what they identified as the priorities. Yeah, anyone that says there's issues, most definitely. And hopefully Randy's going to be able to work with us. I know you were thinking more master plan when you started this.
Well,
But
I mean,
we need to prioritize, and we'll have to work forward in prioritizing what we address first.
I agree. We need it all. We need a new master plan. We need a good zoning ordinance. We need to connect that to the general ordinances.
Because
Police
everything
powers.
talks to each other, you
Yep.
guys, and right now it's not
And-
it's smarter than a fifth grader. That's the problem.
We have discussed keeping the number of articles that we're working on at the same time down a little bit. We've also discussed, we already have a tabled list of priorities. And what we have at the moment is anything having to do with the moratorium. It's the first thing we have to address. Master plan, also on the top of the agenda, and completing anything that we've started. That would leave the campgrounds that you see on tonight's agenda. And then the next big item to tackle is generating a zoning map and reviewing our zoning districts. That's the biggest, it's the biggest one in the whole ordinance that will need to be addressed. And
They're all foundational to this whole
Yep.
thing.
And we have rules of interpretation that we've already tentatively agreed on. The reproduction of the map and trying to find the history on that is, our map is, I have not been able to locate any history of the map's adoption. So what we have in Article 5 is technically what's on the books,
Which are legal descriptions.
which are legal descriptions, and missing some of them. So getting a map and having it adopted, for me personally, top of the agenda. But that's probably a very long discussion on where things are at and the status quo per our readoption of zoning ordinances.
Is there any more?
Is there?
I don't mean to interrupt you, but is there any more information on the stuff from Unicode other than this?
Yes.
Could you send that to me?
How long
please?
is that page?
This is 8 pages.
Oh, heck yeah.
Could you send it to me? Because this is all I could muster up.
I could, but I'm going to say it should come from Cheryl. The official
Okey-doke.
record of what Muni Code sent to us.
It
come
should,
from
that's
Cheryl.
why I asked.
Because
this was the only
there
thing
was
I
a
could
lot
get.
of discussion of not wanting any copies to be out anywhere, so
problem.
I want them to come from the source they were supposed
No
to come
problem.
from beginning.
No problem.
I'm not
Yes,
sure if
Randy.
everyone knows what Unicode is. Are you guys?
No, I do not.
Okay, so maybe just a clarification on that. There's a couple of companies out there that work nationally that work with local governments, and they codify all the ordinances and put it in order for them. Larger cities, townships across the country, there's Unicode's one, Walter Drains and others, a bunch of other ones that, and for the same purposes of trying to keep all the ordinances straight, and they put adoption dates on there, and usually zoning is part of it. Not always, but often it is. So reaching out to
They were
Unicode.
hired to do not only our zoning ordinances, I strongly lobbied the board to also do the general ordinances. Because we have so many that cross over and actually conflict as well. So like at that time, the township board's general ordinances had a noise ordinance and our zoning ordinance had a noise ordinance, and they did not agree with each other. So that was one of the early amendments we did. We removed it from the zoning ordinance. Township board, it's all yours. So we did a lot of that. Municode, aside from reorganizing, they also go through and do basically like a judicial law, current law check. Do you have any ordinances on the books that violate current law?
Yeah.
And they give you a rundown on those.
But their principal purpose is not to be a legal advisor to you, it's just to
Yes.
point out any conflicts. that
Which is
you
why
may
it was
have.
also going through the attorney.
Yeah.
The process just got dropped. So the township paid for the service. They did a lot of work because they were given that 600-page document, but the completion of the process never occurred, either for the zoning or general ordinances. So
Can I ask why?
you can ask, but not me. Because that's not an answer for me to give. I could
I
not.
can't
give
answer you either,
any-
Al.
That sounds to me like, I mean, you paid somebody to do a product and they got
Yep.
it just about done for you and you said, I'm done.
Yep.
They didn't
But-
let them finish it? Or,
Yeah, the board got into some discussions and arguments on how they were going to proceed, and it just hasn't been addressed in 2 years. So, which was past our contract date. If we did it again, we'd have to have a whole new contract with them.
I guess my question is, and I go back to the ordinances, are we at a point now where we should have them look at what we have, try to,
They
And
don't
then- no,
fix, they
they-
really
okay,
reorganize.
okay,
They
just like-
identify issues, but they don't
Okay.
fix the issues.
Okay.
They just say, hey, your sign ordinance is really messed up.
Okay,
They don't fix it. They just tell you that there's a problem.
okay,
And then they put it all in an order that makes more sense.
okay.
We didn't get that far.
So
Um,
being,
One more and then we need to move on. Go ahead.
so being the newbie and.
Yes.
Okay, what's the possibility of just starting from scratch? Just as.
On
like,
the
you
zoning
hi-
ordinance?
Well, you just, I mean, not us, we would take us years, but
Mhm.
somebody who, Randy or somebody like what? It seems like it would be more time and cost effective in the long run, just to scrap it all, start over and have it all done right. from the
You can't, you
beginning.
don't
And I
need to reinvent the wheel. You just have to make sure everything talks correctly.
There
Ours
is-
isn't.
So,
Ours isn't.
There is a
No
problem.
kidding.
so how do we,
Theoretically, yes, we could hire a firm and they could come in and write a whole new ordinance and hand it to us. That's been done.
oh,
It resulted in about 240 people at the school saying and they weren't all using nice language.
right,
By the end, not by the end of the meeting, before the beginning of the meeting, the chair of the planning commission and one board member had resigned because it was not. Now, this is going to purely interpretation. The proposal was not in keeping with the character of this community. It was an ordinance right out of Manhattan.
yeah.
And they hadn't
Clearly.
always even bothered to pull the other township's name off of it. And you will
Wow.
find that potentially in our
Oh,
ordinances upon occasion. Not for me. I
So
always take
where
the
do
township's
we
name
need-
off.
Where do we
Um,
need to start? I mean, obviously, and maybe this question, maybe you can help me, Randy. I'm trying to understand. I mean, we could meet like we did separately. We can pick apart all this stuff individually, but it seems to me there's a much bigger picture we need to look at first, or all that's a waste of time. But
It seems to me you've got, what, it'd be 80%, do you think, is clear in the zoning ordinance? How much would your percentage estimate be?
that's a good question.
It needs to be reorganized genuinely.
Okay, but that's.
My personal goal was to get it all functional before we went to reorganizing it completely. I'd say maybe half. There are some and that's because we started with the things that were more doable, more critical. Once we get the maps in 5 done, then some of the other articles are larger articles that have bigger issues, and they are more like the ones we reviewed, like 30 and 31, that just getting a new
Start over.
entire section on that topic is probably a good way to go. And I'm
So,
hoping that Randy can
so,
help us
so the
with some of
question
those
isn't
in bulk.
necessarily rewriting it, but to actually get a document that says this is the adopted zoning ordinance as we know it today.
And then also going through all of it
Right,
to,
but-
to remove the chunks that just don't.
Okay, but we
aren't
can't do that
coherent.
till we know what we actually have. So is that 80%? Is that 50%? Is that,
Probably 50%, just off the top of my head.
so the other half would be in
Not in
PDFs?
pages, but in content, certainly. I'm gonna, let me see. Down when we get to E, we can maybe pick up a little bit more on this. When Rachel and I discussed the 3 condo type ordinances that we have in our zoning ordinance right now, we had a small work session and went through all of them. We came up with 28, which we redid is the newest article in our zoning ordinance, is workable. There's some tweaks we can make to improve it, but it's fully functional. But 30 and 31, the other 2 are just for 2 planning commissioners. Our net takeaway, having gone through them, then we're start over. This is not fixable. This is not something we can tweak and make it work.
But are we certain that 30 and 31 is what was adopted by the township?
I would not use the word certain because I can't certify it and the person who can won't. For the same reason that she cannot track all of the information. My understanding, she can't track all of the information. So when we go through something, we re-adopt it in full, and then it is 100% valid.
That
Yes,
was my question. Then we're gonna always be here unless we do so, how we're gonna fix it, and that was how we're going to fix it.
When it's
We'll
re-adopted.
re-adopt it,
Yep.
give it a new date, say this is it. If you find an
Yes.
older copy, too bad, this is it.
We have re-adopted, and this is off the top of my head, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 14, part of 12, which is the one we just did again for the second time, part of 14, and then it gets hazy after that. All of the condominium ordinance, all of the mobile home guidelines for the township. And that's probably most of it. It's the back half of the ordinance is what we haven't done, and a lot of those are the 30-page articles that may or may not be functional as they exist. There are certain issues that we know are an issue. Our sign ordinance does not fit current judicial law. We know that. And that's because there were some changes. It fit what the law was then. It has not been updated to what the law is now. There are a lot of things like that's not uncommon for townships, but there are a lot of things like that.
There was a major Supreme Court case on
Yeah.
signage.
That was a big one. A lot of townships are off on it. But we've been trying to go through and get these functional. We were knocking them off probably one article every 2 to 3 months for quite a while. And then when we went into the recodification, we said, okay, we're going to wait until we find out what they have to say. That didn't work. So we picked up about a year ago, we picked it up, or correction, at the beginning of COVID, we picked it up and said, you know what? This isn't going anywhere anymore. We're going to have to pick up and try to get the rest of this cleaned up. So we're going to try to keep going with that process.
So I think for years, this has fallen on you, and you've done a wonderful job with what you
I'm
have to
willing to
work
share.
with. I know. And I feel like at this point, I would need a college degree to pick up and take on the entire thing, right? So, and I think Randy's got the skill set. Is it possible to
We
do a
just hired the
purchase?
college degree.
Right, so can we do the purchase order or whatever to have this? I mean, is that, I don't know, I'm just.
It
throwing
is.
it out
I guess I just need to understand what we have, and I'm not still kind of murky on
And I think
on what's there out there.
I think we need to do it section by section too.
But-
Not, hey, can you fix all the rest of it?
No, I know. I guess really just, we need first, right, the official document,
Okay.
and then
Mhm.
making sure it's cross-checking between everything. And go ahead.
Interrupted him. I
I'm
want to
sorry.
hear the rest of his statement. Go.
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, I'm used to working with a zoning ordinance in its entirety. You have, I understand you need to go to certain sections or chapters or whatever, to make amendments, but I'm not even sure we use the same formatting across all the chapters. It seems as though.
No, we don't.
I mean, it's like, so
Similar, but there are a lot of errors.
it's like, it's like a ransom note almost, the way it looks as
Yeah,
far
it
as,
kind of is.
Some of
way-
it goes to mimeograph.
And it's all because, I mean, it's gone on for such a long time like this, where it's not been really put together in a coherent way. So it's long overdue. We've got to, but I'm concerned about doing individual chapters entirely and not seeing the whole ordinance and not seeing how we reference definitions, which are, I know it sounds nerdy, but it's essential to having a good zoning ordinance to have your definitions that are consistent. And the cross references, when you say site plan in one section, it should mean the same thing across the whole ordinance. So that's my concern. So I guess, and we could talk all night here, I think, but I think we.
And I'm gonna suggest we move forward and add some of this on to next month's meeting.
Which would give us some time
Where
to
to
kind
go.
of, for me to
Yeah.
get into this. a
I
little
guess
more.
my question is, can we move forward with anything till we fix this? And if we can't, then let's fix it
I
now.
think we can do both at the same time,
Okay.
but we need to get this whole
Okay.
ordinance
All right.
together. And I mean, I'm not saying that we don't do that. I'm saying we just do them together. You know, we need all the above.
We're gonna have to spend some time setting priorities.
Okay.
And then,
even
once
if-
we've set a priority, then that goes to the clerk for a PO, so that Randy knows exactly what chunk we're gonna work on next.
Okay.
Now, whether that chunk is 3 articles or, you know, whatever task we've come up with collectively as a planning commission, which is how I'd like to do it. But in order to
So-
get things done tonight, I'm gonna move the agenda forward, okay? So there'll be more time to come back to this. Part of this is us getting the process working with Randy. Make it quick, Heidi.
It's real quick. Who's gonna get, okay, we need a copy of our general ordinances, and we need a copy of our zoning ordinances. So who's gonna?
That's an
aim-
ongoing project and not for
I
tonight's agenda.
understand that, but are you gonna do it? Or am I?
That's
gonna
an ongoing project,
do it? Okay,
not for tonight's
no problem.
agenda. Because been trying to get those for a long time.
Yeah,
And I know the board is trying to work on those. So I'm gonna hope that the board gets access to those for everyone.
I
at
have a
some
dumb
point.
question, but I can't help myself.
Okay.
Why, as a resident of Whitewater, do not I have access to everything that's public in this building? So
You
why
do.
can't we get
You
those?
do.
You do, if
Then
you
why
make
are
an
they?
appointment, come in here and sit down with the clerk's original copy.
So,
It's not posted online
Okay.
like many people would like to see it.
there's one ordinance online.
The zoning ordinance is
Okay.
online, but all the general ordinances are not. And I'll be honest, I think I do have a copy of all of them now, but that was not easy to get. And they're not updated. I don't have like the last 5 or 6 years worth.
mhm.
So if you come in, and I've done this before, sometimes you have to make appointments, sometimes you don't. Tell the clerk you would like to see the general ordinances, you can sit down with the copy and actually read them.
And bring your phone and take a picture of
They
every single one.
should be I personally feel that they should be online,
Mm-hmm.
because those are rules we're all being held accountable for,
But
and they're not readily available.
Now, is that something Randy's going to need to do to put together a project? I mean, you're going to need to know what they actually are before you can fix them or say they're
Somebody's
okay.
got to provide what our best estimate of what is the current ordinance.
For zoning ordinance, the zoning ordinance is online.
But
The ones that aren't readily available are the general ordinances.
you just said it's part of its draft. So how, I mean, it's not.
No, okay.
I'm just confused here.
I know you're confused, and that's why it's a problem. Not a problem with you. At one point, we had someone who made the determination that we don't have enough history on our ordinance, that we should treat the whole ordinance as a draft. They put draft on there, put it online, and lost the copy. Who did what? I'm not gonna go into any of that.
Mhm.
So we ended up with our only closest thing to a certified copy, the working copy that we are using. All of them say draft. They're not draft. They weren't drafts. They were our working copy. They ran them through the photocopier with draft on them, put draft on it with a PDF, and then posted it as our ordinance. I personally disagreed with that procedure, that policy, but I wasn't on the board. So that's what happened. When the zoning ordinance was reposted, they put draft on all the pages of our existing, working, usable zoning ordinance that we were doing for all zoning at the time.
Mhm.
That's about the same time they lost a few pages. I
All
can't,
right, now we got missing pages.
sorry. Oh, that's been for a long time. So trying to prioritize going through and fixing and getting what we have workable, and then any upgrades we need to do. We've been doing minor upgrades as we go through it, but, and I'm sure Randy will have input, and I'm sure we can do it much faster with Randy's input and with a Word copy, which is why we need to get a working Word copy as well. Is that enough that we can at least move on? And I promise I'll put it on the agenda next month.
Wish we would.
Yeah.
We've accomplished
We're
that.
trying. I think we know what we need to know. All right, the next item. Amendment 85, medical marijuana amendment, submission to the township board. You have this in here. It's the same thing we've been working on for a long, yes, Lois.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Oh. I came with a built-in sound system. That's the way it is. Zoning ordinance on medical marijuana. This is where it was at when we left off. We still had work to do on it. We've been working on it for 2 years. It's been through public hearings twice, I think, twice already. But the township board has rescinded medical marijuana in Whitewater Township, thus making this a moot point. So the same thing we did with adult use marijuana, where we made a recommendation, we forwarded it to the township board with a recommendation to not adopt. We need to do something very similar to that. So that's why it's in our packet this evening. What I want to draw your attention to is I have proposed findings of fact in here. If I can locate them. Now you will notice that these findings of fact look very different than other ones we've done because there are 2 chunks.
What page is that?
Page 10,
Page 10.
right after correspondence, right after our mail. Page 10, suggested findings of fact for medical marijuana. I will draw your attention to the very first line where adult use, that should say medical. I just missed it as I reused the comments. Okay, suggested findings of fact. These are the proposals I'm just giving everyone as a starting point for our discussion. But the reason there's 2 chunks here, we can recommend to the township board that they reject all of it. Or we can take out the last section that had to do with caregiver establishments, caregiver operations, which is the homegrown medical marijuana guidelines that we had in our supplemental provisions that we were proposing for supplemental provisions. And the definitions that went with them. That's what that second section is. We could send it to the township board with a recommendation to reject everything except for the caregiver operations guidelines that we made. And it is, need input from everybody how you would prefer to do that. And then I have sample potential findings of fact incorporated here for that. So what do you guys think?
Well, you still should keep something in there for the caregivers. Because they're still here.
They're still here. The guidelines we had, we thought were good for caregiver operations to begin with. When I went to write this up, I'm like, wait a minute, that might still be pertinent. That might still be something that we should have included.
But does it have to?
It doesn't, we did not add any guidelines other than what's currently in effect in state law. We did add definitions. And for those of you that were here 2 years ago, which might be no one. Sorry, that's a little weird. When we put that together, a lot of what we wrote for caregiver operations was really more for the education of the person who isn't running a caregiver operation and more for their next door neighbor to know what the guidelines were for the establishment that they know is going on in the garage next door. So that it didn't look like we were completely ignoring the topic, that we were addressing it, and these are the guidelines. Because we have had some issues with power issues or radio interference. If you're using the wrong kind of lighting, there can be, I guess, radio and or cable internet interference. We've had that issue with homes where the property owners could not figure out what was going on. Well, there was the wrong kind of lighting was being used too close to their house in another person's property. This spells out things like that that shouldn't be happening. So where are you at? What do you think? How would you like to handle this? A recommendation to reject all of it or a recommendation to split the difference? Keep the relevant stuff and get rid of the stuff that doesn't pertain anymore. And if anyone's unclear, Township Board has already voted to eliminate medical marijuana as well as adult use marijuana from the township. So it's not something that this time without a new ordinance, it could not go through.
They're saying they rejected everything?
Yes.
Except the
No, no.
caregiver.
Pardon?
All commercial, grow and processing, medical and adult. They did it in two different meetings, two different operations, but first they rejected all the adult use and then they rejected all the medical at the next meeting.
Well, shouldn't we do the same thing?
That's what I'm proposing. That's the top half of page 10. The bottom half of page 10 is, okay, should we keep the caregiver, the home grow rules as part of the ordinance, or should we just say we don't need any of them? And that would be the home grow rules in the ordinance, in the article here, up here.
Section
on
1, 6 through 11.
Page 16. Marijuana caregiver operations. And then the definitions, I also included the definitions that went along with that.
Is it necessary when there's state rules? I mean, would you just look that up instead of?
But, okay, so you have a caregiver living next door to you. And you gotta read the rules because maybe it's okay you can smell it, but you can't. Maybe it's okay you can see it, but you can't. So the neighbor has to have some concrete evidence of what he's up against. The community needs to know what they're up against. So you gotta document it somehow, because how are you gonna answer somebody's question when they call you up and go, hey, I can smell weed? How are you gonna answer that question? Well, we have caregivers in the community. You know,
There is an additional reason to have it in the ordinance. If it's in the ordinance, the township, when they're made aware of an issue, can call the sheriff's department or a constable or can take action. If it's only in the state law, then the township can call the state and ask them to do something about it. So if it's in our ordinance, it does give us a little bit more leeway in even the little things like sending the zoning administrator out to have a discussion about, hey, your odor control measures are not working. It's not something you want to typically live next door to.
or the side of your building fell down
It
and your
stinks.
neighbor can see it now.
That's helpful information. Thank you.
Any other questions?
My opinion is keep it in there so that you have a little more help for the general public.
Okay.
Randy, what's your opinion?
I agree.
Okay,
I do too. It gives us
something.
something to regulate with, I guess.
Okay. Anybody got a motion? What you need? That's okay. This is not our motion. This is a findings of fact. Okay. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I'd make the motion that we
And then we can discuss.
accept this as we discussed, where we leave in the caregiver regulations.
Okay, so, motion to forward to the township board.
Yeah.
As per outlined here,
Mhm.
correct? Is
Correct.
that-
Mhm.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Now we can discuss what you want in the findings of fact. So we have a motion to forward as proposed here to the township board, which is disapproval of parts. Now I have in here 1 through 5. It would actually be of part of section 1 and all of sections 2 through 5. All right, because those are the sections that pertain specifically to commercial grow and processing. And then
Section 1.
down at the bottom, I outlined exactly what we're recommending they keep. The second paragraph, last portion.
What page?
Page 10.
Oh.
The planning commission recommends approval of the definition of marijuana caregiver operations, marijuana primary caregiver, and marijuana qualifying patient. Those were the only ones I saw that directly related to caregiver operations. If anybody thinks any of the other definitions need to be included, speak up. From section 1 and approve sections 6 through 11, which are the caregiver operations and all the legal mumbo jumbo that makes it valid. The joint and severable violations, all the stuff that's always in there from the attorney. Of the proposed amendment 85 regarding medical marijuana. We have findings of fact, whereas medical marijuana has been rejected by Whitewater Township residents by a referendum of the voters, whereas the Whitewater Township Board has voted to rescind authorization for both adult use and medical marijuana commercial grow and processing facilities within Whitewater Township, the Planning Commission recommends disapproval of parts of section 1, all of sections 2 through 5 of the proposed amendment 85. And then at the bottom, and we can change those findings of fact. Those findings of fact, is there anything that anyone feels should be altered from what we're putting forward or added to on the findings of fact, the top half of page 10? Pertaining to what we're suggesting that they reject, what they disapprove. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that.
The second half, whereas marijuana caregiver operations are permitted within the state of Michigan and Whitewater Township, whereas, and these are the facts that we are basing our decision on, whereas common sense guidelines would be helpful for residents and neighbors to be aware of standards for such establishments, whereas enforcement of standards can be addressed locally if within the ordinance. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the definition of marijuana caregiver operations, primary yada yada, as we previously discussed. Is there anything that anyone feels should be added to the second half of this pertaining to the caregiver operations or taken out? Either way. I'm just providing this so that we have something to start with.
So you ever know where you are, Carl? Lois has a hand up.
Page 10.
Carl, do you know where you are? 16?
Lois, if you disagree with what we're doing as findings of fact, you can bring it up with the board. This is the Planning Commission discussion at this point. So if you disagree with the wording, that's something for you to take up with the board. You're not a member of the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will put forward the wording as we see fit. Okay. Does anybody see anything additionally that we should alter, adjust, clarify, amend, etc. And I'm perfectly fine with, put it out there.
Carl, you know where you're checking, right? You know what you're looking at?
Page 10, okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So you guys all understand that you all read 6 through 11.
Yep.
Read section 1, 6 through 11.
No,
And it's,
we're keeping part of section 1
I know
and
that.
all of sections 6 through 11.
Correct.
Okay,
So you've read 6 through 11 and you're okay with those?
Obviously, we just
Yeah.
sent, I just made a motion, we sent it
Yep.
to the board, so I
Okay.
haven't read the one. done it.
So you covered, so you know, smells covered, anything, the smell, the 3 issues you have with the caregiver operations are seeing it, smelling it, and then inconvenience to a neighbor.
and
We've
we
covered all that.
hammered those out
I get it. I
really
just wanna
well a
make
long
sure-
time ago, and I think we've been really solid on those guidelines for a long time.
I mean,
All
I'm
right.
okay with it. I'm just making sure everybody's
Okay.
okay with
Well,
it.
why
That's
would you
all.
think we're not?
Here's my only question. Your motion, did that include using the proposed findings of fact as amended?
Yes,
or-
it does,
Okay.
as written,
Okay, as written or as amended?
as amended.
Okay. And Lois, I will give you a copy of the words that we are changing. Okay. If you didn't get them, but I'll go over with you.
I
All
can't
right.
remember the sequence here. Was there a public hearing already on this?
Yes, we've had
Yeah.
2 public hearings already on this, so. Roll call vote when ready.
Yes.
Yes,
Mangus,
Yes.
Steelman,
Yes.
Carl is absent, Robel,
Yes.
Okay. Unanimous agreement to forward to the township board Article 85 with a recommendation to adopt half and reject, reject half and adopt one small portion specifically spelled out here per our findings of fact. All right, I will forward that to the township board and they'll have that to add to the other things on their desk currently. All right, thank you, gentlemen. We are now moving on. The next item on our agenda is citizen planner enrollment. This afternoon, I sent an email to the clerk, just trying to get a clarification on the process. Everyone kind of agreed that it would be good to start citizen planner together at the same time in October. The information I received back was what Cheryl wants to see from you is a copy of the enrollment page. I'm assuming you can do a screenshot and forward that to her so that she can issue a PO for the exact amount. I don't know, normally the township just pays them directly. So I can't say that all my questions were answered. If you have more questions, ask Cheryl.
This is the first time I've heard of this.
Does
Okay.
anyone know how much it is? Do you know how much it
Well,
is?
last time I
Anybody?
checked, it was like $325, but I haven't checked in a while. It is budgeted. It is within our planning commission budget. I make sure that I set aside enough funds in our continuing education for every planning commission to take the class. Last month, there was one page by itself with a paragraph that had information about citizen planner, Carl. And what it is it's a training program for planning commissioners. It is available in person sometimes, but right now there aren't any in-person classes nearby. But it is available online. So to the extent of that people are willing to jump in and do the training, it is available. It is covered in our budget. The township will pick up the tab. And if you don't have a laptop, they'll give you one of those too, assuming they've gotten more of them yet. I think there's a snafu one getting those ordered as well.
You're saying we have to fill out a application?
Cheryl said that she wanted to see a copy of the application page, so she was issuing a PO for the right amount of money.
And where do I get that?
She, when you, if you, I can send you a link. It was in our packet last month, but I'll try to pull it up and send everybody the link again. Cheryl should be able to pay for everybody directly. That's as much information as I got. So I think once she has it, she will probably just do a group enrollment.
And when is it?
It's, we're gonna do it online.
Okay.
I've taken it before, but it's not available in person anywhere within a reasonable driving distance. And it is a longer course. I think
Yeah.
when I took it, it was 6 weeks
6
for
weeks,
like
yeah.
2 hours. And I know, Carl, you've taken really good advantage of the available training.
Yeah, yeah.
For several seminars that have been available around here, but it's, most folks aren't going to want to drive down to Detroit. I think that's the only place an in-person class was available for 6 weeks. That's a lot of driving when you can do it online.
And if you need better internet, you can come here and sit or
Yep.
go to the library.
Most of the time, the room's empty anyway.
Pardon?
I said, most of the time, this room's empty anyway, and it always has Wi-Fi.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. If it's in last month's packet, I should run.
Yeah.
My problem is printing. I may or may not be able to print.
It's a hyperlink, or it's a link. You can just click right on it. It will take you to the website for the citizen planner enrollment for the class.
Oh, okay.
So you should be able to just double click on the blue
But
stuff.
Sharon wants a copy of the, I'll see what I can do.
I asked her what the process was. That didn't.
Carl, if
I'm
you can't
supposed to have-
print, take your
Anyway.
cell phone and take a picture of the computer screen and then send it to me and I'll print it for you.
Been there, done that. I think once she starts getting multiple applications, once one person sent it through, she's gonna know what the price is.
My-
It
My
should,
township computer
resolve
is
itself.
supposed to be set up to print, but I never tried it since it got set up, so I don't
Okay.
know. I could switch it over to my other computer. if I
so
had to.
that should, she's been warned that there are applications coming her way. And it's self-paced. You can all work on it at your own pace as you see fit. I am going to add a line item to next month's agenda to discuss if anybody has questions, issues, or you can give me a call. We'll work it out. If you need more discussion time other than what's available online, we'll try to work it out and get you answers.
You can always call me.
So-
I'm signing up next week and starting. So
That should be
Okay. Anything else on that? All right. The work group report, we already discussed just a little bit, but we'll run back through it. Impressions, I'm going to put you on the spot, Rachel. I kind of gave a nutshell of what our impressions were when we went through the 3 articles in our zoning ordinance that pertain to any form of condo type development. Do you want anything you want to share?
31 and 32 need to be scrapped and started over. I was looking at a couple online.
Yeah.
And I really liked the links, the hyperlinks, the tables, the graphs, there's just so much, it was so much clearer and it made so much more sense. So that's my takeaway for those 2 articles.
We sat down and it was a really good work arrangement, I thought, because I knew what was kind of meant by the article and Rachel was new to it. So if she had a question, that told me that it needed some clarification. Maybe there's more that we could do on that section. This is a fully functional section of the ordinance right now. Could it use some fine tuning, particularly to help those who don't deal with it on a regular basis? A developer's going to look at it and he's going to know what he has to do. But other members of the community aren't. So we're trying to make it a little more entire community friendly. You will see in your packet, starting on page 20, it says, PC notes to township attorney regarding zoning ordinance regulations pertaining to all forms of condominium development, September 25th, 2022. We wanted to keep things moving and we did not yet have a planner, nor did we have any dates on when we could expect to have a planner. So we wrote this
with the intent of sending it to the attorney for his commentary. I would like to suggest to the planning commission, despite what's written on the top of the page, that we send this to Randy as his first project to look through, as opposed to the attorney. The attorney has already looked through our ordinance and done at least 2, maybe 3 reviews of it and has no problem with it. So a fresh set of eyes to look at what our questions were. This doesn't change, this wasn't proposing changes. This was proposing questions that we would like to have answered and our thoughts on what things might improve the overall readability of the article. So I'll put it to you, gentlemen, and ladies. Ooh, that's new. Sorry, have to rebel a little bit. I've been the only woman on here for a very long time. Do you want to send it off to the attorney for his comment right off the bat, or do we want to start with Randy and then send it to the attorney after Randy's had a run through it?
I think I'd personally feel more comfortable with it if Randy looked at it. And I think when we send it to the attorney, it'd just be a formality. We'll get it back and we'll be okay.
Okay,
I'm good with that because there's no consistency on some of this stuff.
Randy, are
So-
you good with that?
Yeah, I am. I guess I just want to mention, I think what I saw, and I didn't really go into a lot of detail with it, was that, the consistency between this and the state act, the condominium act, and making sure that we have the consistency we need between the two. The attorney may have done that. I'm not sure, but I saw there were a number of definitions, for example, that are missing, and I want to be sure that we use.
That was our request to, or that Rachel and I came up with, that maybe we
Okay.
should have a few more definitions.
Yeah,
We do in our ordinance, our procedure has been to put all of our definitions in the definition section.
and that's where it belongs. so-
Right.
But yeah,
Because it's.
well, that's not where they were.
Well, that's another problem.
Not
with-
where they were.
That creates confusion.
But, and to create a section for all condominium definitions within our
Okay.
definition section.
Because
So,
you change
if-
verbiage here, but you only change it
Yep.
once.
well, we're not changing it. We're asking if it can be changed, and I don't know if it can. So these are all really questions, not more than recommendations. Would everybody feel comfortable making this Randy's first project?
Yep.
Okay. And,
Can I add to that, though, with the larger discussion we had before and trying to making sure that that's not the only thing?
they're
we're
gonna link
looking at?
to other
All right.
sections. I understand.
Yeah.
Yes. The other 2 things that we went over in the same meeting was Articles 31 and 32, which are planned unit developments and commercial overlay planned unit developments. So commercial PUDs and resident and other PUDs. Rachel and I had the same impression when we went through it. We went through it with, okay, what can we do to make this more functional? And our joint consensus was nothing. They're not functional. And for just 2 members of the planning commission, our consensus was they're not fixable, that we would be better off getting Randy to find us a boilerplate from somewhere else and put in our own standards, or to create a brand new copy based off of looking at other copies, because what we have is lawful and does have standards, but is really not comprehensible in a meaningful way. Does that work, Rachel? Does that make sense? Okay.
Just a couple of thoughts. That's, I don't care for the term boilerplate because I think you have to make a PUD exactly what you want it to accomplish. We really want to spend time with that and think about how to incentivize that as the preferred development approach in Whitewater Township. People will go to the condominium subdivision as the default because it's easy, it's predictable, and it's timely for them, for the developer. The trade-off you want to encourage the developer to go to the PUD approach so that the community has more opportunity to be more creative with the land development. approach.
if the planning commission wants to push it as a preferred development. And if it was written differently, we might. But,
Well, I think
yeah, we're gonna have to
most-
look at the standards. We're gonna have to look at what
Most
it's.
communities are going to want to do that. Most of them would prefer to have the opportunity to review the development and be more creative and encourage the developer to be creative too. Anyone can punch out a standard subdivision and be in and out in 6 months. You know, the PUDs are more difficult, but there's got to be a reason for the developer to
There
choose
has to be
that.
a reason.
That's what I was gonna ask, is what would that incentive be? What would the reason?
Well, that's where the art comes in, and that's why you don't do a boilerplate. That's because you actually try to write the PUD in a way that is going to be incentivizing it. The developer sees a benefit in terms of reducing his development costs to do that PUD, and maybe has more flexibility in terms of the land uses that he's going to put in there. So it's probably a whole nother meeting to go over all that.
Oh,
but-
it's definitely,
Yeah,
definitely a whole nother meeting. You can, a lot of times it includes mixed uses. So, I don't think it was last month, I think it was 2 months ago, we had, correspondence that gave us from Vicky Beam, if that helps. Find the correspondence from Vicky Beam that was giving an example of one, I'm thinking it was in Leelanau, it might have been downstate, where the neighbors objected and they switched over to a PUD instead of a condominium development. But they dropped down, and this is off the top of my head, bear with me, it's a little bit old information. They dropped down from 50 units to 48 units, tiny bit, and added a 22 unit commercial storage complex and open space. So what they got out of it was they only lost 2 units. They have a whole bunch of open space. They consolidated all their construction in one corner of the property, and they got a whole commercial development added to the project, and everybody was happy. So it can get very, very different from what you have in just a conventional condominium subdivision. PUDs do not have to meet the same standards for lot sizes that a conventional condominium development would. So yeah, things get creative.
So that's where the art comes in. That's where you know what a developer looks at when they're crunching numbers on a development, and they're trying to time his money to those people, you know, and that's understandable. They're in business. But so you've got to write the zoning ordinance in a way that incentivizes that. the PUD.
So would we be within reason to say we're going to go through our 28 condominium rules and touch those up?
Yep.
And work with you on redoing 31 and 32, probably
Yes.
simultaneously.
Yeah, I think it definitely needs work.
Okay.
You know, we need to think about, and maybe that's.
Are you comfortable? I mean,
Yeah.
some planners don't write ordinance. So are you comfortable with working through
No,
that
I
process with
long
us?
ago really went to getting into the ordinance language, because if you're going to write a master
Okay.
plan and you don't write the ordinance stuff, you really aren't taking any part in implementing. And the Planning Enabling Act now requires, as of 2008, requires a component of the master plan to address specifically how you propose to change the zoning ordinance to implement the master plan. So you almost have to know a fair amount about ordinance language and preparing how it's structured.
So do we have a consensus that we're going to prioritize 28 for Randy's time right now? And then I think we may have to look at what our next priority is, but that 31 and 32 are on the to-do list.
Yes, but I feel like it would be ideal to see all 3 together.
Okay.
For me, like I'm visual that way.
Would you mind moving your microphone a little closer? I'm stuck down here. A little more.
And the reason I say prioritize is because we need to finish what we have on our table right now. And when we sit down next month and we discuss priorities, a zoning map may trump the need for commercial planned unit development, which hasn't been done in 14 years around here. Simply because the zoning map is where everything goes.
And that also ties to the master plan, because we have to have all of it together. We need a future land use map and we need a zoning map. And that's
I agree with Rachel. Is anyway, all these are going to have to fit together anyway. Is there such a thing that we could have Randy look at all three of those right now? Or together, I guess should say.
We'd be giving him 5 at the
That's-
same time.
If they fit
I-
together though, if they're gonna have to mesh.
They don't as much. I mean, I see
Well,
PUDs separate from condos.
The way I'm hearing it is you want to write 28 so that they're going to be more likely to choose 31 or 32.
No,
No.
28,
No.
and then we'll
No.
get to
That's not what you're
31 and
saying.
32 later to
You're
addressing
close.
them.
I'm close. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
confused, but I'm a newbie, so.
Most planning entities prefer PUD and COPUD to regular development.
well, the COPA is kind of a unique thing here. It's not really, I don't know where that came from.
Good luck finding it.
Yeah, well. Oftentimes it's just one PUD.
There is currently only one that I am aware of in existence of a COPUD in the township. And that's because they were not allowed to.
So we do have a COPUD?
Oh, yeah, we have one business that was put in under the COPUD regulations.
What
I-
business is that?
That's Heights Machinery.
Oh.
And that is because they were not allowed to do anything without it,
Because they had,
is my understanding.
the problem in the building was they work on heavy equipment and they needed a higher ceiling.
No, that wasn't even.
That wasn't it?
They wouldn't even address that. They made him put in a short ceiling.
Oh,
It was, yeah, that was not pretty.
well,
Um,
we gotta leave it in there if we have
I
one,
know.
but it should be
Um,
for a reason, not because it was
yeah,
something they
I know.
didn't like.
I know, yeah, we won't get into that. That's a rabbit trail that we don't.
That's
Don't
all
need to go
right,
down
I'll
right now.
research it, I'll figure it out.
Okay. So, consensus, we're going to prioritize Randy's input on 28 as soon as we can, and we'll discuss it more at next meeting. We're going to do 31 and 32 at least. Those I think do need to be together, but as Randy, as you go through, and I'm sure between now and the next meeting, you can at least read those 3. We'll be looking for your advice on what you
Okay.
suggest also that we prioritize your time, because you only have so much time, and the master
That's
plan
true.
is a big deal. The map work that we're doing for Article 5 is going to cross over and be relevant to both the master plan and the zoning ordinance and foundational. So that kind of hits 2 categories at once. All right, yeah, in the interest of time, I'm going to suggest we move forward with that. If anybody has other notes or other sections that they don't like, do like in 25, in 28, let us know. In the meantime, we're going to give Randy some time to get up to speed. We're going to get his 2 cents worth and his replies to the questions that Rachel and I put forward. Some of those questions were as simple as, can we change this definition? He's probably going to have a yes, no answer on those. And some recommendations on definitions for other stuff that we thought might need to be defined.
I agree.
And
now.
whether or not, well, if that's another section, that's somewhere else. So yes, things are very interrelated. If you want a really awful read, you can also try our landscaping article. Yeah. Most of the figures are unlabeled and missing. Makes it difficult. All right, we have just a few minutes left. I do want to get to, let me see, what do we have technically on the to-do list? Work report, we got that. Planning consultant and master plan review status. Status is, we have a consultant and we're moving forward. Woo-hoo, finally, we got there. So we checked that one off the, like I said, this agenda was made before we had that taken care of. Update on pending projects. That's what we've already spent quite a bit of time discussing, Article 5 and the zoning ordinance word copy. It's hard to do anything without the word copy, and Article 5 is foundational to the master plan and everything else that we do in the zoning ordinance. So I'm going to suggest, unless someone has something to add on those 2 items,
I
that
have
we
one.
jump down to first review of Article 25 campgrounds.
Never mind. Well, I thought you were throwing it all on.
Nope, not all done. We don't have a lot of time to spend on campgrounds. So I just want to give you an idea of where this is at, where this came from, and then maybe we can start moving forward with it. When we started working on Article 12, our table of setbacks and guides, yard regulations, we had two objectives specifically to make, or several objectives, to make the whole article readable, to create a Word copy so that we could actually make changes finally, because that used to be mimeographed, to address apartment density that had been missed with an amendment, and to address campground density, which was just never defined and never set up outside of the RC. The RC had a restriction, but other districts had campgrounds and had no standards for density. And those things came up when we had a potential development, and we said, whoa, wait a minute, we have no limits. We should probably have limits. We were able to incorporate what we thought was already our guidelines for apartments into Article 12. And the attorney recommended that you need to do a lot more with campgrounds than just set an overall acreage density. You really need to go back and look at all your campground guidelines. And once I went back and read them again myself, I was embarrassed because I was on the planning commission. It was probably the first thing that occurred when I first came on the planning commission. This is where we had standards, and it said permanent cabins. Didn't say you could have them, couldn't have them, what they were, etc. So what you have in front of you, you will notice is almost all red. Red's new. I took our existing ordinance and a couple other similar ordinances on the same topic from other townships and incorporated everything we had and any of the guidelines from other surrounding areas that I thought were pertinent, relevant, usable, functional, and then reorganized it into a better, more usable format by topics, location, site requirements, buffering requirements. Instead of having scattered, you'll notice at the end of this article, I have what is currently our ordinance. On page 34, 34 is everything we currently have for requirements for campgrounds. And it's a buckshot approach. It has one line on one topic and one line on another topic, and there's no connection whatsoever. What I've put in front of you is actually 4 pages of ordinance. So a lot more specificity and an adjustment from the standards that we have to the ones we discussed last month. Where last month we said, okay, we need a different buffer, we need a larger buffer, we need more space, we need lower density. We need more clarity. I tried to hit all of those. What I'd like from you guys is, what do you think? Did everybody have a chance to go through these guidelines? Was there anything you didn't like, anything you did like, and how would you like to proceed from here?
I found out something not too long ago that in order to vote in this township, you only have to live here 30 days.
Mhm.
I object strenuously to allowing people to camp in a campground for 30 days. Most campground, when you're looking at for campers, not RV communities, it should, in my opinion, be no more than 2 weeks. I think that's in line with a lot of campgrounds, state campgrounds. Because you could have a group of people come in and rent these places for 30 days, become voters. We have a small township, and they could sway an election of some sort. That's one. Secondly is itinerant workers that come up here. They could go to one campground for 30 days, move to the next one for 30 days, and another one for the whole summer. And, you know, prevent anybody else from using the campground. Or the tourists that want to come up and for a week or two, people want to come up hunting, fishing, mushrooming, they wouldn't be able to use them. So I think more than 2 weeks is unacceptable.
Okay. What a lot of places have done is they've adjusted that to 28 days. So it keeps it under that. But one thing I want to address, and I'll get to Heidi,
Okay.
is itinerant workers. They can camp on farms, they can have buildings on farms. That's under right to farm, and we can't restrict it. Pretty much, period.
Carl,
So,
before you even start,
Okay.
I gave you, we have a campground here, okay? And it's a business, right? Because the taxpayers want us to run this like a business, right?
Correct.
Don't you think these rules should match these rules?
Well, I'll have to read them first. I haven't re-
yeah, we haven't had.
Oh, okay, well let's step back another step. Okay, does the park have a management plan? Because we talk about a management plan in here. So I emailed the clerk and asked her if the park had a management plan. I have not heard from the clerk. So I pulled up the policies and procedures from our park. Now in our park, you can reserve a spot for the whole season practically, because we have seasonal campers. So.
But we don't need to make our ordinance match the township parks rules.
Okay, then
It can be the other way around.
that too, but, okay, so.
Just
I'm-
because one thing isn't working doesn't mean we want to match it.
Okay, I completely get it. But until we find a management plan or find out what they're really doing, you can't have a business you're running with your name on it and then tell the other guy down the street, oh, by the way, we grandfathered them in, you can only stay a week. No
If we have a
problem.
different parks manager, then maybe we would have different parks guidelines. But the management plan that I have discussed in here is really more a matter of, they need to present us with their plans for rowdy behavior, their plans for quiet time, their plans for RVs. Are they allowed to have ATVs in the facility? Can they have snowmobiles? Can they have ATVs, or can they have them park there and leave directly? If so, how do they get to the trails? Are they allowed to ride around the property? That's with Mr. Avina's property down here. We said, in fact, he initially said, I'm not going to allow
Right.
ATVs to drive around on the property. That was one of his guidelines. We're not saying that this is your rule. We're saying you need to tell us what your rules are.
I have a question. I think if
Yeah.
we adopt and change the rules, then this needs to be adopted and changed as well. So
But
that,
only the board can do that.
yeah, but I think.
I
how-
understand
How can
that.
we tell John Doe, the private citizen, he's building campgrounds, when we're down there doing the exact opposite? We can't do that. So,
Yep.
so
Well, and we
That's what the
just
board's
got
gonna
this
have
too.
to
I'll have to
change
read it.
that.
I haven't read it.
the board's gonna have to
It-
make it comply with.
These two don't talk.
Well, we can fix that. The board can fix that. We can say, this is what we're recommending that you do, and they can either reject it or accept it.
So the campground guidelines that we have here, is there anything, Carl had a specific one, the 30 days you did not
Yeah,
like.
I think most, like the state parks, are even less than a lot of your commercial, they limit you to 1 or 2 weeks. When you're getting into an RV campground, you're looking at people that come up, like on the big one in town, they stay all summer. Well, this isn't the type of a campground, I
Can
think.
do it here.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
that's,
just letting you
yeah,
know,
I know.
Carl.
our
But is that-
campground guidelines have to cover tents
yeah,
and RVs
right.
and permanent cabins.
And the
So
question.
it should cover all of those basics.
But is that a commercial campground or is it a
You take
township
money,
something different?
you take
It's
money,
public,
it's public.
but I
I
don't,
say it's commercial.
Yeah.
To me, it would be. It's, I mean,
so I think that we need to look at what we want for the campground guidelines in Whitewater Township. What we want, not, we want to see this rule. What we need to be asking the proposed development, this is the information we want from you on your application in order for us to review what you're proposing. That's really kind of more where we're at, so that we can determine if this is going to be able to be run in all likelihood in a manner that is not detrimental to the neighboring public. The township's part, yeah, when we get done with this, we may say, hey, board, can you take a look at our commercial guidelines and cross-reference it with your park and see if, maybe something needs to be fine-tuned. I don't want to write our ordinance to match the park.
I didn't say
Might
do
be
that.
The other way around.
I'd like to
But-
hear your opinion,
Well,
Randy.
Kim, I have a few comments here. I'm not
was
sure.
that?
I have a few comments as well.
No,
on
go
just
ahead.
the whole ordinance. I find a lot of areas in here that need to be addressed. I think, for example, just going through it on site requirements, traffic impact studies may be required depending on road classification. It doesn't really address at what point that's going to be required. You can say that it's required when there's 50 or more cars in a peak hour that are expected from a campsite. We can quantify that and make that a little bit
Okay.
more clear. It says visual buffers or screens shall be required when a natural barrier is not present. It really doesn't describe what that buffer is supposed to do. or
There's a
what
whole
material.
nother article.
Yeah, we just said that didn't have much sense to it because the graphics don't work.
Yeah.
But probably the biggest issue, I think, and I brought this up before at a prior meeting about the site density of campsites and cabins and how that's calculated. And it says almost the opposite of what I suggested before, because it says calculations are based on the total acreages minus any lakes or wetlands. I really think you want to define the size of each campsite as a maximum and not take, if there's 40 acres, not simply do the math and get a certain number of campsites and cabins, because you're going to end up with a whole lot more campsites and cabins than you anticipate. You've got 100 or 200 foot setback around the outside, this green belt that is mentioned, which is kind of a vague term. So I think there's a number of recommendations. I didn't get a chance to get them all on paper for you, but I will do that for the next meeting.
Yeah, I had a question about that. When I was reading in the this online program on that, and they are talking in terms of usable acreage, which would possibly include more things than a marsh or a lake or something. They say calculated based on the usable acreage. And then again, what's usable, what's the definition? But the question is, if you have an 80-acre parcel, 20 acres is not usable because there's a pond or a lake. Is your density based on so much per acre of total or so much per usable?
That's exactly my point.
And usable might be a term you use instead of minus what.
And then you're gonna have to have some kind of a definition of what usable means.
Or simply say that every identified campsite on the site plan that they give you is 4,356 square feet. So that,
Because
But isn't that already defined by the state statutes?
well, but it's how you're interpreted, how it's written. What it says, calculations are based on total acreage. So if there's 80 acres, you don't just divide it by 43.5.
But it also says you have to meet all the state guidelines, so it's already going to give you a minimum per campsite.
and you know,
That's not the way the ordinance says though. So if you're,
So,
but you could have, the campsite, the state has a minimum and that's all I've got. I put it back here, all of the campsites from the state park. In this town, I have the size of every campsite and what it's used for.
Mhm.
And there's like 400 of them. But that goes way back to the older 1988 standard, and they've got some that are 25 by 20, right? That's okay for a tent camper on a bicycle, I guess, not even in the car. But there has to be flexibility within the plan. The topography might tell him he can only have a 30 by 40 in one spot, but he could have a 50 by 80 in another spot, but you might want to have for drive-through campers. So you got to leave the flexibility for the developer to come in. But realistically, I don't think, from what I've seen, you could, with the state regulations for the roads and bathrooms and everything, could have more than 4 per acre. Now, if you had great, big, wide open 100-acre field, I think by the time you got all the regulations, would be very difficult to find out you could possibly do that. But we should,
cabins?
if we want to have a,
he just meant sites.
per acre limit, that's fine. But like he said, the one he looked at, it was like a little over 2 per acre based on their model of what they wanted in the Upper Peninsula.
Well, and what I had on that graph is just a suggestion. My thinking was that perhaps we wanted to have a limit on the total size of a facility, period. I put 100 just as a discussion point. But I don't see our township really wanting to have campgrounds with more than 100 sites at one spot. But that's something we can assess. I also put a maximum, and all these things can be
Yeah.
moved, removed, or altered in number. But I put maximum units per type, 10 cabins, just for discussion, 80 RV sites on 100 tent sites. So you never have more than 100 sites total. We can do that, or there might be other calculation methods that we want to use.
We had that proposal last year of that big campground where they had about 300 campsites.
And they all met the rules.
And yeah, they all did. I went, and got a magnifying glass and measured it all out.
Yep.
Yeah, they were adequate size, so.
But we kind of, I think unanimously agreed, that really wasn't what we were thinking of with, that was no place you could have campfires. There was
No.
nothing recreational about our recreational park.
No.
It was just parking spots. As many parking
Yeah.
spots as could fit on that piece of property.
Well, I don't think we should be telling the developer how many he should have of each size. That's not for us. We're telling him a minimum size. He has to have at least that, but if he wants to have a lot of smaller ones, he doesn't want to cater to the big RVs. That's fine. It's up to him.
But do we
his
want more than
business.
100 campsites?
Pardon?
Do we want more than 100 campsites at one campground?
I don't care.
Okay.
I just don't care, provided he meets all the state guidelines and our guidelines,
You only got
whatever it comes out
55
to
here.
be.
The more
But-
you have, the more density you have, and the larger the number in one parcel of land, the
But-
more of an impact it's gonna have.
But
on
I
the
agree
neighbors.
that
So,
we may need a maximum acreage. Do we want a 300-acre campground? Probably not.
you could limit it by maximum acreage, but at the same time, that's limiting how much open space and trails and walking and woods they
Yeah.
have around it, which I kind of like. The more buffer they put around the perimeter, the better.
Well, you know, there's all those things you can incorporate, but just to say he has to have so many of a certain size.
If you have,
I was
The
thinking
whole
that as a limit.
topography may not be agreeable to that, you know.
Well,
it's-
what
I
if
don't
someone
know.
comes in and wants to put in
I don't know,
60
it's-
cabins?
I mean, you know, there's a lot of discussion that we have to have. But
60 cabins is more of a motel than,
yeah, I don't.
campground.
No, that's.
so,
Yeah,
I'm
that-
gonna pass it off to you, Al.
well, the amount per usable acre, I think, would fit better in the amount. So if he has a 30 acre or 400 acre, if we keep, just like we want to do, we want to let people use their property, right?
Mhm.
So if he has 100 acres and he can get X on it per acre, usable acre.
Mhm.
Now, if that size is 4,000 square feet or whatever we did aside for what we think is
Mhm.
going to meet our goal of keeping it as nice as we can be. I think limiting, saying you can't have one in over this many acres. If he's got a 60-acre lake there or a pond or a 60-acre wetland, why then he can't develop that. So I don't think the size should be limited.
No,
The
overall
acreage.
size, I wouldn't want to see that limited. Randy, I know you haven't had that much time to go through this. Would you want to run through this and
Yep.
give us your
I will-
comments?
I will mark it up.
Suggestions?
Yep. I'll
Okay.
mark it up for you.
Um,
Give you some comments there.
Before we close this one out, is there anything else specifically going through the rules that we have that I've put forward that you just didn't like? Hey, that's a stupid rule. I don't want them doing that. Or anything that you thought, hey, wait a minute, you didn't address X, Y, and Z.
Other than the 30 days doesn't match what you already do on the other side of town.
You mean the township park?
Number 5,
We
duration
can't control
of,
the township park.
okay, I
Yeah.
completely get that. And that, not even that, you have to remember too. There's that little word of grandfathered in. So, I'd like to see greenbelt defined better.
Okay, I think we have that one.
You already brought up the buffers.
Come
I
out
don't-
of, Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I don't like D. I mean, operating hours shall be approved by the planning commission.
You didn't like D what?
Oh, I'm sorry, 11, the management plan, under the management plan.
Mhm.
Is it really our job to tell them what they're doing? Shouldn't the hours be presented in their site plan first?
It would be presented and that would be up to us to approve what they have proposed.
Wouldn't you do that anyways, regardless if this information was in here or not?
This is, I see this more as a list of things they should be telling us
I
how
get
they
it.
propose to handle it in their application. But maybe it could be better clarified.
I want to know what solution you're gonna give them for J, excessive dust, noise, traffic, transportation.
give us a
shall be
page.
inflicted. Page 33.
Oh, okay.
Excessive dust, noise, traffic, and trespassing shall not be inflicted or adjacent should not be inflicted on adjacent properties. Appropriate fencing, design, signage shall be provided to address any issues that arise. Well, considering you're putting, these campgrounds can be accessible through 2 tracks, dirt roads, whatever. Are you gonna let them police that on their own, or are you gonna put something in there to reduce complaints?
Well, that's why they need to tell us how they plan on handling it. Avina's property, he came to us with a
Right, he
recommendation
gave an
and
extra
offer
brine.
to Brine
Mhm,
at
and
his
give it-
expense in
right.
addition. I think it's 3 times a year or
Yes,
twice a
he
year.
does. I think
At
he
his
went to
expense, he does the public road to public road brining standards, 2 additional brinings per year. So that was his recommendation. I know Horse Shows by the Bay, their recommendation or their,
They gotta clean the streets.
well, their way of addressing it was they have water trucks that it was like once every 3 hours, they were covering every trail because they couldn't pave it. That's not good for the horses. So it was all dust. It was all it was soft soil on purpose. So they had water trucks that circulated all the time during business hours. That was their recommendation. This is just saying, hey, how are you going to deal with this? We know it's going to be a problem. And maybe we need to be more specific. I'm sure Randy will have some suggestions for us. Anything else specific
Just-
to issues that you had?
Just
Oh,
about
yeah.
Airbnb.
go ahead,
Go ahead.
go
No,
ahead.
just one
Okay.
last one. What are you gonna do with people Airbnb and their campers in your campground? I guess. Yeah.
Rent your camper, you rent your camper, they rent the site. So,
I was thinking, Ken, I think we need to discuss more of that 30-day issue, because
Okay.
if you've got people that come up here for the summer and they come up with an RV, and if they want to stay for the summer,
Mhm.
and if that's what the developer is building it for, then we should let them do that.
what a lot of campgrounds, I noticed what a lot of them do is, and I don't know if I had it here.
You have to move
Just a
every
minute.
30 days.
We have
Yeah.
some of them.
It has to be moved. It cannot be in the same slot
You have to
for
share
90
the
days.
The ones we
beautiful
did
You
in,
have to move.
in Manistee was 14 days. You could stay in that slot, but then you had,
And
to
then you
you
switch
could move
slots.
them next door if you wanted to,
Right.
if they had a spot, but you did move, and that, everybody was happy with that.
Well, because everybody gets the primo sites that way.
Yeah, so if we want to be more clear on that, or.
Yes, that probably needs to be better defined.
Okay.
Then you have an RV park, you don't have a campground.
Oh, you can camp there.
No, you don't have a campground, you have an RV park. So they can stay the whole summer, they can bring their double, they can bring whatever they want, park it there. That's not a campground. Now, I'm talking a campground that people come with RVs, they come in for a week or 2 at a time, just like our state parks. They don't allow you to stay the whole summer.
No, but they.
But they don't
our
kick
park-
That's
you
it.
out.
If you want to have an RV park, that's different subject.
If you want to stay at a hotel, you're not kicked out at 28 days.
Nope. But this is a park. This is a campground. This is a campground where you're not meant to stay there all summer. If you want to have an RV park, fine. Yeah, but
Okay,
that's
well then,
different.
we have an RV park. because
Right, you got an
just
RV
said
park.
Seasonal people come.
Yep,
They get the
That's
primo
what you have.
spots. So this should say RV park, not camping.
And I know friends
It
that
is
come up
only
here
limited
for a couple
spots, by
weeks,
the way,
and they-
but
and they
still.
love that park.
Yeah.
They
And
only-
some places allow storage, some don't allow storage. That's
Yeah.
one of the other things we'll have to determine in this. If are you gonna allow off-season, or are you gonna allow off-season storage of the campers? You know, what I proposed in here was, I think 50% of this available campsites. No more storage than 50% of the campsites. That's just a starting point. So, hey, I think we have some good points that did or didn't sit well with everyone.
I thought it was a
Going
good start.
forward, do you want me to run back through it and take another shot at it? Do you want to hand it off to Randy and get his 2 cents worth? I think that's where we're at. Does that work for everybody? To make another run through it when we have Randy's input.
Yep.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'll try to find a management plan for this park.
Good luck.
Everything's like this.
For you, in the way that you have your contract set up with the township, do you want me to send the supervisor a statement from the planning commission requesting a PO for Article 28 and 25 campgrounds?
Yeah.
How would you like it handled?
I would, well, as I said, I just really didn't want to have, it's the township board that appropriates the funds and everything.
Exactly.
And so we don't want to get into a lot of work here that the township board isn't willing to fund. So I don't think there's no surprises or anything. I just want to make sure that it's a clear communication between the planning commission and the township.
These are pre-existing projects that we're already into and want to finish.
I think if you would
as we
just send
move
them an
forward.
email and copy me on it, that would be great.
Just a minute. Okay. Planning commission as a whole, do we have a consensus on those 2 items forwarded to Randy for his review? Article 28 and 25 campgrounds.
I do, I agree. Mhm.
Okay, Carl?
Yes.
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Heidi? Okay,
Yep.
that's everybody. So we have a unanimous consensus that we are going to forward those items at the request of the PC for Randy to review to assist us in completion of an ongoing task. Work? Okay. All right. We got a lot done, spending in some circles, but that's kind of where we're at with some of this right now. Next item up, additional meetings. Where are we at with going forward to next month? I don't necessarily feel like we have any projects that are ready for additional meetings. We do have some things that may be moving forward from the zoning administrator to us. If any of those are a huge rush because of the moratorium, if the moratorium is lifted, that may mean some things are gonna hit our way real quickly. And they may find it in their best interest to request the PC hold a special extra meeting to catch up on some of the time they missed. Is that something that would work for everybody? And or do we want to plan an extra meeting or hold off until we have something else to work with that's more specific?
With the task we've given Randy, how long would it take Randy to have you go through those items, do you think?
Well, as I said, I want to get it to you before the meeting so that if you're meeting in 2 weeks, that gives me a week to get it done. So that's not a lot of time.
So would our November meeting probably be the most realistic with what we sent your way?
Realistically, yeah, maybe it were a little bit sooner, that'd be fine, but
I
no.
think if we have another meeting sooner, what I'm seeing, that would be if our zoning administrator is shipping us something very specific for us to look at. I don't see any of our current projects being at a point of pushing forward to try to hurry up and get it to public hearing for review. We've cleared our docket of clearing marijuana cleared 80% of our docket right there. And special use permits cleared, the other 20 almost. So we're picking up where we've had a couple meetings in on these newer topics or continuations of previous topics. So would I be remiss in saying, we're not going to plan any special meetings for this month unless it's brought to us by an outside party. And we're going to shoot for review of the two things that we did this evening with Randy at our November meeting, along with a strategy session on how we're going to move forward and Randy's recommendations for moving forward on the master plan.
As well as the whole ordinance.
Yeah, and the
collection
ordinance
and getting that into a workable
work
form.
up. Okay. And I'm going to continue to work probably separately on getting Word documents for everything. Just because we need it to do anything else. Just, yeah, you can't make changes unless you have what you're changing. That's an ongoing thing. I have your comments and reviews of the various articles, but they still need to be adjusted, corrected, amended, and run back through the process. All right, we have, okay, so no special meeting scheduled at this time unless something comes up from an outside party. And we are going to move back to public comments. This time we are going to start with Zoom. If there is anyone still on Zoom that would like to make public comment to the Planning Commission, please use your raise hand icon or wave at Lois. Vicky, it's all yours.
Good evening. Thank you again, as I mentioned in the beginning, really appreciate everybody taking the time that you do. I have to say, and I've said it before, I'm very sorry for all of you trying to do your job without the correct tools. I find it absolutely unbelievable that you don't have copies of ordinances. Carl, you mentioned that you can't print. Somehow I think if you guys don't have access to computers, the tools need to be provided so that you're all prepared for these meetings. We were really counting on you guys to be able to be prepared. I mentioned at the beginning, I cannot tell you how thankful I am that Randy has joined the township and is helping. I'd actually like to hear more from the other PC members. This is the Planning Commission. And a lot of interruption came from the chair tonight. I was actually a little frustrated. Randy and Rachel had great ideas, but we were never able to hear the entire idea. We are in a real mess right now. Again, as I mentioned, it's the Planning Commission. All of your voices should be heard. Randy started talking about something he had shared that sounds like could be our answer. We don't need to totally recreate or reinvent the wheel. You know, a lot of people say imitation is the best form of of flattery. But you know, having some hyperlinks that will take you to where you need to go. You know, let's bring this township up to the times. And again, we only got to hear a portion of it because he was interrupted yet again. As I mentioned, I was just in Nashville for a yearly meeting that I go to. We were a big group. We collaborated and worked together to solve some issues and meet goals. I would love to see this group collaborate and work together. As I said, I've already said it, but I think it bears repeating. This meeting, ever since I've been attending since March, is dominated by the chair. The members try to speak up and are interrupted. And most of us, like I said, would like to hear this. And what a great opportunity. Rachel is new. She has new eyes to look at our problems. Randy was hired as an expert, but again, was very, very seldomly was he able to finish his thoughts or comments. I mentioned at the beginning, the pressure is real. We are ripe for the picking as we stand right now. Please listen to all members, not just the chair. I'd like to know how the Zoom recorder, whatever the title is that Lois is for this, is allowed to make comments in the meeting, but the public can't. And I'd asked that question and she responded to my comment that she was pointing out factually wrong information. Factually wrong according to who? I'm here to watch the PC. You all decided on citizen planner at the last meeting. Kim, you mentioned that you just reached out to Cheryl about the details today. I'm a planner. That is my nature. Maybe having planned and reached out to her sooner, you would have had a lot of additional information and a lot less questions this evening. You mentioned that you thought a lot was done tonight. I respectfully disagree. I don't understand why you are not having Randy work on 28, 31, and 32. The campgrounds, there's nobody talking to you about that right now. Is that something that's a priority, or could that be something that's passed down the road? Please take this time to figure out what the area residents and infrastructure can sustain. Carl made a mention about he doesn't care how many campsites there are. Maybe that's something that you should hear from the public, what our thoughts are. Again, thank you for your time. Brutally honest, but it needed to be said.
Vicky, are you still on?
I am.
Quick question. Are you telling us, I hear what you said, and I will try to work on your constructive criticism. I'll say that first. Are you telling us that you are getting responses from the Planning Commission on the Zoom chat feature
I sure did.
during the meeting?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I'm as appalled as you are, Kim. And honestly,
But we will have to work on setting up a policy to determine whether or not that is, that's something we'll have to check into. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Sure.
And I want you to
Yeah,
clarify
thank
it
you.
after the meeting for me.
What was that?
I want to clarify it after the meeting for me.
What I'm hearing is that responses were being given to people who use the chat feature on the Zoom function. And that response was not from anyone on the Planning Commission.
That is actually 100%. I took a picture of it, Kim, and I will be happy to send it to you.
So
Because none
that's,
of us are on Zoom right now. We didn't want to backfeed.
Lois
I'm not on
was,
Zoom.
Lois was commenting to someone who made comments to the Planning Commission that like I said, I don't make policy and procedure, but
that's what I thought you just said.
that's why I
Okay.
was trying to clarify, because that did not sound correct to me. I'm not the policy person. I don't even have a copy of the policy and procedures manual, and it probably isn't referenced in it, but maybe it needs to be.
I just
Because
want
I
to
don't want anybody
verify,
speaking for
I
me.
just want to verify to the public right now. Randy's not on Zoom. You're not on Zoom, are you? Wait, I'm not on Zoom. Are you on Zoom?
I can put my foot in my mouth all by myself. I don't need
Are
anybody
you on
else.
Zoom? No.
Always got a pencil.
Okay. Just so, thank you for
Okay.
that clarification.
So I apologize for getting a little derailed. Do we have any other public comment from anyone on Zoom? Okay. Any public comment from anybody here in Township Hall? So Connie Highmore, I spend half my time on Zoom and half my time here. When I'm not in Williamsburg, I am down home in Monroe. So I've been on Zoom. And I know that I type comments in sometimes stating that we can't hear people, and hopefully that gets passed on, and sometimes it does get passed on. Lois does say the people in Zoom land can't hear you, or just like tonight when she said, pull your microphones up. So I know that that happens. It was frustrating to me sitting here, knowing that 3 times Lois had a comment, and I know she's not part of the Planning Commission. So I think that her comments are, the proper place for her comments are at the podium. Because if I can't speak, so I have a lot to say, I could have said a lot of stuff, but the comments should be in public comment. And typing a response like that to people in Zoom land, yeah, that can't go on. Because there's no power there. That's a Zoom recorder person. I don't envy you, your positions. I wouldn't or couldn't do your jobs. There's a lot of errors that are going on in the township that happen beyond this room, beyond what your power is. There's a camper that's a permanent structure in our township. Has a little straw foundation around it, hooked to a power pole, not a temp pole, hooked to septic and a well. How? We all have things that we have to follow in the ordinances. How did that get allowed? There's a garage built on someone's property with no access to a road. It uses a trail. The person uses a trail, a township-owned trail to get to their building. The ZBA case that Carl was talking about, where they tore down a shed, they're replacing that with a small house. Had a bedroom, it had a bed in it. I think it had a toilet in it, and it had some storage area. It showed the measurements on the drawing. It was like 8 feet by, I can't remember. I'm not going to say because I don't want to be wrong. They're replacing it with a 2-bedroom home with a full bath, with a 3/4 bath. That is not like for like. These are errors that are being allowed, that are going through the zoning administrator that ended up in front of the ZBA. And I know that their focus was on the fact that they were moving this building that was grandfathered in, moving it into the current right setback, getting it away from the water, but getting it within the setbacks so that it wasn't so close to the property edge and away from the water. But they didn't put up a shed for a shed. They put up a house for a shed. So I don't know how those things happen. Because to me, the zoning ordinances clearly states that you can't do that. I know it's a compound. You use the word compound. So there were structures there before, but that wasn't a house for a house. It wasn't a torn down home for another home. This is not like for like. So I don't know how that's going on. I'm not sure how the process works here. I think I've questioned this before, and I know I don't get an answer tonight, and that's okay. So if anyone on the board, on the PC wants to clarify this to me in an email, if I'm understanding correctly, through the month, the PC chair is looking at and rewriting amendments to ordinances. All of you read it in a packet and then can prepare your comments for when there's a vote, and then you discuss it here. So if it's my understanding, none of you have anything to do with the things that Kim is writing in the packet. Because I know Rachel and Kim got together and had a powwow and did a lot of work on some things. And I think that's a great way to work together. So it makes me believe that it's not just one person putting a bunch of work in by themselves, and you guys don't get to say anything until it's written. So I don't know how it really works, but to me, it seems like Kim is doing a lot of the writing all alone, and then you get to pull it apart here. So that's why it seems like nothing gets done. I mean, big mountains of things don't get done. I know all of you work hard, so. Yeah, when Vicky said that it seems like there's not a lot of progress, I think that's what we're talking about. We're looking at the same packet, and I don't know where we went today. So anyway, thank you.
Hey, Kim, if you're talking about the campground stuff, we discussed that in one whole meeting. And everything that you've seen on there that I seen, and I was there in the meeting.
Yes, sir.
We all discussed it as a group, so I totally don't understand when you say Kim's rewriting, and they had a subcommittee, and that's authorized to do. In the campgrounds, we spent, I think we spent about an hour on it. So,
Right.
And this document was based on that.
yeah.
So
I'm just talking about the writing of all of the things that are in the packet, the entire packet of all of the amendments that are there, the things that are in red. Do all of you get a say on what those things say, or do they, she's writing them and then you're doing?
That was a previous meeting.
guys, we can discuss it
Okay.
later.
Yeah, we discussed.
So,
We're turning into a discussion. We don't want to.
So I'll just reach out to you, or you reach out to me for clarification on that. I thank you. Thank you all. I do appreciate you, all of you.
I know it's a killer not to answer questions. It's painful. I'm not always real good about that. Go ahead, Lois. You're up.
When I get back to the computer, if you'll let me, I'll read you my response that I did on that, just for your information. What I was trying to point out in your findings of fact, as they are written and the way that it was approved, it says, whereas you corrected adult use, whereas medical marijuana has been rejected by Whitewater Township residents by a referendum of the voters. That is incorrect. The medical marijuana was not rejected by the Whitewater Township residents by a referendum of the voters. And my statement only to pick your game because she stated a question, why can Lois make comments and the public make comments? My response only to her, not anyone else, because I wanted her to know that there is factually wrong information presented that I was trying to point out. That's all. And point it out once it gets to the board. And once it came up here, I didn't feel that I needed to just take it to the board, but you all needed some explanation. But I didn't.
And we probably may have been better off leaving the language adult use. But it is important for the members of the planning commission to correct me if I make a change that's inappropriate or incorrect. And it's important to draw the distinction between public comment, you are a public, and planning commission comment. So, all right. Do we have any other public comment in town hall? Okay. Do we have any comment from the planning commission?
Yes, yes. And I say this, I've been here 2 years. This is the first meeting I have been at that I've been able to hear everybody. So thank God
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry
I've been
it's taken
complaining
this
for
long.
2 years about it when the other equipment wasn't working properly.
I'm glad could you actually hear most of it this time?
Yeah, Heidi still has her microphone a little too far away.
I want you to email Don, okay? 'Cause he took care of it.
But,
Thank you.
yeah, I could hear her pretty much most of the time and her too. But yeah, and it's a matter, you can move these around and I didn't know you could extend this up and put it behind. But that's good. And I wasn't at the last meeting, but I did review it. And I think some of the things were said at the meeting before that. And I agree, you, cop, did put in a lot of the things that were discussed. And I know that I mentioned the state regulations that's in there now. So I don't agree with everything, but it doesn't matter.
We're not there.
I have my say and I'm very happy with it.
Okay. Yeah, this was, there's more in there than what we discussed, but I tried to keep it all to the gist of what was discussed and what we felt was still lacking. Filled it in, now we can take out anything that we think is unnecessary or add more. I'm glad you can hear Carl. That had to be just so frustrating. And I will share with everybody, I received an email this morning. Oh, by the way, Zoom and the sound system don't work in Township Hall.
It's okay, I'm on it.
So at noon today, I was like, cancel the meeting.
We didn't cancel.
And thankfully we had everything. I had called out the troops and everything was up and functioning again by our meeting. So if anybody has a chance to send Heidi now or Dawn later, kudos, thank you. I'm glad it was working. We appreciate it. And I don't know what the issues were. It just, the initial email I got sounded like that we didn't even have speakers. That probably wasn't the case, but I'm glad you could hear, Carl. All right, do we have any other comments or input from the planning commission?
Waiting on you, Al. Aren't we going in a circle?
No, we're just,
Okay.
anybody have anything?
I
You're up,
have some
Heidi.
comments. I would have sent these earlier, but there are a lot of pages, you guys. So I didn't want to like send
Oh,
you
I
a
missed
heart
your,
and
I missed your line.
you
item.
did, that's
Sorry.
okay.
Heidi, continuing education.
Ready to go.
It's next, it's active.
I didn't want to send you guys 160 pages to read because I didn't know how long her packet was gonna be. So if you give me all the cards back with emails on them, I will send you stuff on comp plans and procedures. I will send you stuff on short-term rentals. I'll send you a link from Randy. It's a really, really good read about a community, how all their ordinances are put together and they talk to each other. I did send it to you, Al, as a guinea pig. Thank you. Did you read it? Did you read it?
No.
That's okay. I sent it to you. You were my guinea pig, but it just proved to me that even if you would have opened it, it was 170 pages. So I just did that. You were my guinea pig. So I will send all that to you guys. And in the meantime, I will really try to get a management plan of our park. Because I really don't think we can have guidelines and have two different entities exist. Am I out of line here?
They don't have to match. We do what we do.
I
and
get it.
then
I get they don't have
they
to
do what
match,
they do.
but just to look on his face, that's all I know. Okay, I'm done, but if everybody gives me the cards back, I'll be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other planning commission discussion? I apologize, guys. If I was interrupting a lot, give me a dirty look. Say, yo, Kim, shut up. I will try to work on it.
Awesome.
You can give it a shot, Heidi, but we're 50-50 here. All right. And meeting adjourned.
Awesome. Seriously, look at what this is.